There we go. Should be. All right. Ideally, that means we should be live now. And yes, Godless Iowan, we are supposed to be live at the moment, but luckily enough, we are. Also, RJ, I've sent you a link in the Google Hangout itself, so you can look at the chat as it's on.
I don't see the thing, and I'll have to hunt around for that.
Should be a message I sent to you. I can actually send it to you over Twitter as well.
I don't have Twitter up. Well, you'll just have to act as moderator there, and if there's anything that pops up in the live chat, you can call it to the attention. I will be beholden to you.
Fair enough. Well, I've sent it to you in Twitter. It's also in your Google Hangouts. If you look in your Google Hangouts, there's a message there as well that will show you where that is. I know you're used to the live Hangout setup where the messages are a little easier to see. They're in the sidebar. This one, you're going to have to pull the pop-out messages from the side. But with that said, how's it going, everybody? I know we don't have a terrible lot of people in here right now since Ideology is currently going at the moment. But today we have RJ Downard on here, and we are going to be discussing the Flat Earth, because that is obviously a hot-button issue. For some reason, it makes me lose faith in humanity in many different flavors. But we're here, and this is what's happening regardless. A few bits of housekeeping to get out of the way, and I will announce this again, because ideally we should have some of the crowd from Non Sequitur / Ideology coming over here in a bit. But this is primarily going to be a fundraiser stream. We'd like to improve the quality of RJ's channel, and to do that is unfortunately going to require some equipment. So we're going to try to get him set up with a Blue Yeti, better camera, nice boom arm, just enough stuff to get him set up to where he can run his channel a lot better, because RJ provides a whole lot to us, especially on Evolution Hour, where he talks to Jackson Weed and Cat Brony and a lot of other personalities, where a lot of questions that people have about sometimes harder to discuss topics can get taken care of in about an hour's time every Wednesday. And that's usually around 9... It's either 8 or 9 Eastern. RJ, would you correct me on which one it is?
Yeah, it's 5 o'clock Pacific time. So whenever that is at your time, whatever planet you live on, that's it.
Fair enough. All right. So that is his channel. I also have a link. There's 2 different ways that donations are going to happen tonight. One, if you want to support getting RJ's channel up to speed, then donate via Super Chat. We have it set up right now where those are going to filter into getting equipment for RJ. He's put me in charge of holding on to that so that he doesn't use it to buy more spaghetti, apparently. But also...
Yes, I'm tired of spaghetti.
Also, if you'd like to support RJ on a more permanent basis, then I have provided a link to his Patreon as well. So go ahead and take whichever one you want. Also, looks like... you're right. It does look like RJ has no videos on his homepage sometimes, so we might need to do some restructuring on his channel as well as...
Yeah, I had 2 separate versions of things where I've suddenly realized that it was automatically defaulting to a different email account, so it popped up that there were some that were separate, so we need to have somebody go through who knows what the hell I can do to correct that, to get everything all up to speed on it. And well, I did get the live chat, so I can now see that. Hi, gang.
I can go ahead and once we're done here, I can help you get things set up on there a little bit better. It doesn't take very long at all. Prophet of Zod had the same issue for a while, and I actually I mentioned it to him as well, and we got him set up a little better too. So basically,
that's because I'm a doofus.
The other thing tonight is there's another announcement that I know RJ has alluded to a little bit, another project that's going on right now, and it's the crossed purpose for us increasing the audio fidelity on his equipment. So, RJ, would you like to talk about your book and that project?
Oh, yeah. Well, before I actually launched the Evolution Slam Dunk thing, I had tested into the waters a novel, The Paralogs of Phileas Fogg, and that actually was a lifesaver for me because, I suppose I should turn my stupid camera back on. That was a lifesaver literally for me, because I was in really deep shit financially all during that period. And my brain suddenly said, at night you're going to fry if you worry too much. So suddenly it said, oh, you need to go back to 1872 and write this story about Phileas Fogg and who he really was and all of this. And literally like a gush, I was doing all of that late at night. before I went to bed. And in the course of 6 months, I wrote this mystery science fiction novel. And then I discovered maybe I could do the novelization of it because it was kind of like a visual screenplay in my head. And then some people told me about self-publishing ebooks, and so I put it out there. And then I found out through some local club members, writers, about the Create Space that Amazon.com did. And so I was able to do a published version of that. And suddenly I had a book out that people could buy and that. And I had long thought how much fun it would do to do the audiobook version, which apparently I've been bumping into people over and over again who are very much audiobook folks. They may have dyslexia, or they just like to listen to things that way. They don't have the time to be able to read a hard copy thing, or don't like to read it on a screen. And so they like the audiobook, and I think I can do the audiobook. So Suris, as a terrible victim, said, hey, maybe he could help with this, and we could actually do the audiobooks. And for that, you checked into all the physical details to know that it had to have a certain audio quality, and this little pathetic thing that I've got ain't going to cut it. So that's why the upgrade to a real adult microphone, the kind of fancy ones that you have.
Yeah, I know a lot. I know most of us, me and Godless Lion went both, plus a few other YouTubers all swear by the Blue Yeti. Ideally, we should be able to earn enough in the couple hours we're going to be online today to facilitate picking you up one, because not only will it be good for getting your channel's fidelity up, because I would like to see your channel improve. I'd love to see more people coming in to watch an Evolution Hour, because it is very, very, not only entertaining, but it's also very educational. But the other thing is definitely... YouTube, as any of us know that have made YouTube either a full-time or a part-time thing, a lot of us are running it as a pseudo part-time little amalgamation of things. It's not exactly... Godless Ion has let me know that he's left non sequitur for this. Now I have to dance. I might dance at some point during the stream. If it will get RJ a microphone, I will do some dancing.
Yeah, we will entertain. I won't sing expressionist German art songs because no one would call that entertainment.
Fair enough. But I know that for me personally, I became a patron of RJ's because I do want his work to continue, and I do want it to actually succeed. And I do want him to not have to deal with bowls of spaghetti every night. But on top of that, I was like, well, it's another thing I can do to support him, because I bought Aaron Raw's book, and I try to buy things from people who I do respect and who I do have a certain level of want to patron to, not just through Patreon, but through any other means. So I went on to Audible, and I said, I'm going to go ahead and purchase RJ's book. And then, of course, there were no books by RJ on Audible, because even though he has all of his stuff on Amazon, he has not set up the audiobook version of anything. Yeah. And so here I was sending him a tweet going, why do you not have an audiobook version of this out? And now the end result of all that is here we are attempting to increase his audio fidelity so we can get this. So needless to say, I'm going to be hearing the audiobook that I wanted to buy, but I'm going to be hearing it raw first.
Yes, you get it live. I actually did a little test because there's a local friend. She bought the hard copy of the book, but would also love to have the audiobook for it. And when I was over watching a movie with her at her place, Around the World in 80 Days and 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, various ones that she's never had a chance to see before. And 20,000 Leagues was definitely connected. And so I did a little bit after that where I did a live 3D performance of the audiobook right in front of her, where I read the first couple chapters to her, and she seemed to enjoy that.
Fair enough. Also, Holy Kool-Aid has asked me if the stream will have cake. He just sent me that over Twitter, and I'll go ahead and let him know that there can be cake if he wants there to be cake.
I see Godless Iron. I didn't know RJ had a Patreon. I do. The problem with Patreon is that there's like a threshold level before they really start shelling out funds, and I'm way below that. So for all practical purposes, it's like kind of like theoretically Patreon, and I call attention to all the Patreons on the channel because it's not their fault that the money doesn't actually get to me. They put up their stuff in good faith. But my GoFundMe is actually how stuff can funnel to where it hits my bank account for real in a hurry.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I will say that there is, if I might make a suggestion, so one of the differences between GoFundMe and Patreon, with GoFundMe you get things faster, but the idea is to get it to where they can sustain you. And I would say that GoFundMe is better if you need a bill paid now, But Patreon is much better if you want bills paid till the end of time.
Yeah, and I'd love to have sustainers. I mean, a couple hundred people doing like 5 a month would be a miracle for me. That it's not a huge number of people. I'm not trying to build an aircraft carrier here, but
But if we could get RJ building an aircraft carrier,
I see some new science book or things, or some creationist book online where I go, "Oh gosh, I'd like to get that for the work," and I can't.
No, and well, that is one of the reasons that we're here. Is again, the Patreon is listed down below for RJ, so we can get that there. And on top of that, if you want to help in the immediate, the super chats, or I would have his GoFundMe linked as well, but RJ kind of slapped my hand on that before this and said, no, it's better that it doesn't go there right now.
I'll put a link up to it, but remember that this thing to raise money for the microphone thing really needs to be dedicated to that, because I would be really tempted to use the things for the things that are important in terms of living. And so if we're going to get that microphone thing, it should probably be a separate goodie. But I will put the stupid... if I've got a wrench, I'll put up the GoFundMe there as well.
I can give you a wrench when you send a message in there, and then I have a chance to give you a wrench that way. Also, Iowan has a suggestion for you, which is you need to set up an Amazon wish list so that people who would like to support you can also pick up.
I do have a wish list up there of books I'd like to get. Yeah, I've done that already. That's been mentioned to me before.
Okay. Well,
there's an awful lot. They're both. Yeah, I don't have a thing yet. Have I?
You'll have to send a message onto the chat.
Also, Reese, I'd have to do. Well, there's some. Okay, let me see. The Seago is the last end of it. So you just go www.gofundme.com and then put a /Seago on it, and that's where I'm at. And or you can find the link at my website. God, that's tortuganwordpress.com. You can find the bloody thing there.
And with that said, Reese had a question in the chat, which was, what is all the stuff behind you?
Oh, that's my many, many years of CD collecting, back when I actually had money. From when CDs first came out. Wow, I can get music on things that are easy. And then so all the stuff is functioned. It's all classical music and some comedy albums. Very, very few of those, all of which are also related to music, like everybody from Martin Mull to Victor Borge and Spike Jones and all that. But the vast majority of the stuff behind me is just the classical music section. And essentially all the stuff that I had in albums that I'd been collecting for decades before that, I wanted to get the CD versions so that I could listen to them that way, not have to flip sides on a Mahler symphony so much. And then I also delighted in acquiring stuff from composers that started becoming available in the CD era, because basically they were so easy to produce that orchestras would be recording, especially minor orchestras and minor labels would be recording stuff that had never been recorded before, like the symphonies of Joachim Raff and that, so I was able to get a big sense about the whole sweep of music in a way that I didn't before.
That's fair. I know that for me, music to me is just whatever I happen to have crammed on this now, but that's, I guess, the generational difference here. My back is blank. There's not even the couch back there that used to be there, but we completely redid all of our office spaces, so now I just have a blank area that needs to be fixed up. But with that said, also, hi Clade Starfish, how are you doing? I will say this.
Hi Clade.
With everything that has been said, and I will be repeating a little bit of this later for whenever we get more people coming in, possibly from ideology, whenever that concludes. But they have a very hot-button issue going on right now, so I don't think that it's going to conclude anytime soon. But we're going to be here a little bit.
Out of curiosity, what's the hot-button issue they're thrashing about?
They are talking about feminism and do we need it anymore?
Oh, yeah. Well, the simple rule is every organism should reach their best potential, and gender is irrelevant to that. Everybody should do that, and the society should be committed to facilitating that. So bingo, that's the universal.
Hey, there we are. There's no conflict whatsoever, and if you can get a whole bunch of fourth waivers to agree with you, we would have a lot less
Tortugan alerts are going to flash on those.
But with where we are right now, The conversation is going to be about flat Earth. Now, granted, the original idea, or no, the second idea, the original idea was just talking about flat Earth. Then the second idea that came up was, why don't we get a flat earther on the actual show? And for the last week, I have tried. I have asked people who know flat earthers. If you're on my Facebook, you've seen me spamming a little bit, trying to get people who are flat earthers on the show, literally just trying to grab people who might have that particular thought process to come in here and discuss it. But for some reason, every flat earther either responded with, "Oh, I don't have the time to do it at 9:30 on a Thursday night," which I'm sorry, you probably aren't doing anything else. I mean, especially
they gotta clean the basement.
Yes, the basement where they live. Or I would get something along the lines of, "No, I'm not going to come in here so you guys can just gang up and make fun of me." And like, well, hold on. One, there's only one guy who's going to be talking to you. It's not going to be me.
Me? Moi? Sweet little moi?
And first of all, if you think that RJ is going to gang up on you, then your intellectual honesty is already in question.
Yeah, that 65-year-old man beat me up on the internet. Damn.
Also, Skylar said in the chat, I kind of thought this thought earlier, but from a certain angle, wouldn't the moon or sun be seen as round if you were underneath them, if they didn't state it was simply a projection? I guess in reference to the flat earthers. But the first thing that I wanted to tackle today, which is one of the reasons we're here, ideally, if we can get a flat earther on, this is an open hangout. So if you happen to know anybody who has that ideology, let them know that they can come on in.
Got plenty of questions I'd love to ask them. I mean, not a gang up. It's just curiosity.
Yeah, just to pick their brain. If we can get them on. Now, there is one particular flat earther that some of us are familiar with who might be seeing this video later. So if you are watching this, Wonton, emails were sent to you to see if you wanted to come in here. But that said, since we do not have a flat earther on right now, we're going to have to go with the original default, and that is talking about some of the history and maybe a little bit of the I'm not even going to use that word for it. A little bit of the S word. It can't be, that word doesn't work for here. It doesn't at all. I don't want to disgrace that word. But don't even lie to me. I know you're not a flat earther. Also, hi Shane. How are you doing? But one of the first things that we all need to figure out, we know that one of the original models posited for the Earth was the flat model. So would you like to talk a little bit about what things were like when we were working with the flat model, and maybe what kind of first got us out of it? To first put a stomper on the idea that the flat Earth is a new idea.
To ancient people, how the hell would they not think the world was flat in the old days? You walk around, you go maybe up on a mountain, you see more mountains. You could see that it's a big place that you're on, but the idea that it's a giant sphere is not intuitively obvious. And only bit by bit did they start noticing peculiar things. Somebody finally would have spotted the fact that during eclipses, as the dragon eats the moon,
I know, right?
Suddenly they're seeing that their things are like circles. They're circular things. Something that's shaped like a circle is moving in front of something else that's shaped like a circle. And so little bit by little bit, the sciencey minds and the astrologer types and the proto-science types began to kind of think about things. And by the time you get down to Greek science, and those damn Greeks, they just thought about everything. And so they would ponder all sorts of stuff. So we get atoms and philosophy and Greek theater and all that kind of wacky stuff. From the Greeks, but Aristophanes, who had a lot of time on his hands, could figure out, this was about 500 BC, somewhere around in that range, could realize that he heard an important piece of news, that on a particular day when there was an equinox, that there was no shadow at all on a particular sundial in this town in Egypt, but there was definitely a shadow on the dial in this spot farther north. And the I can't say light bulb went off. The oil lamp went off above his head, and he reasoned that this is geometry. Damn it! That if the Earth is curved, and we know the shadow size of the shadow in the spot where it has no shadow versus the one where it does, and we know the distance between the two, trigonometry and geometry can work out how big the Earth is, pretty much. All you need to know is to how far apart they were. Hey, I got a slave. Walk it. which is exactly what he did. And I think it was like 500 miles or something. I mean, it was a ridiculously long amount of thing. But when
But
when
if you're
you're a
a
slave
slave,
owner,
what else are you gonna
duh.
do?
And so in the Greek version of global positioning, he managed to find out a pretty good guesstimation of how far apart these two nomens were. And then you supply the math, and he came up with a quite accurate depiction of how big the Earth was. And at that point, it was kind of taken off. This was like one of those like Einstein moments where everyone's going, well, that settles that shit. And Greek science pretty much accepted the notion that there was a curvature of the Earth, and they'd figured out how big it was. And now this explained why there was a circle on the thing when during eclipses and all that, because the Earth is round. Duh, it's a globe. And that it was only a long time later that you started wondering about, is it a rotating globe or not? And is it at the center of the universe and our planets revolving around us, or the other way around? And that, of course, was way later. But the shape of the Earth thing was pretty much settled in Greek science. And gradually this steeped into other people's viewpoints. Everywhere that was touched by the Hellenistic science picture started adopting this. This was like cutting edge current stuff. You don't want to be behind the curve now and go with that old flat model. And this included early Christianity. The old biblical worldview, like almost everybody else, was flat as a pancake. And it had pillars, and there was a big firmament on top and all that. And you find a lot of biblically based flat earthers still following that format today, because that's the old traditional biblical viewpoint. But because the church and the imperial church wanted to stay trendy, they began to gradually adopt that concept of the Greek science. And by the time you get into the Middle Ages, the Christian church had adopted an Aristotelian worldview in which you had a globe Earth. Now, there were still some holdouts in the 2nd, 3rd, 4th centuries, and that Cosmo Indaplustes, I think, was one of them, and there were a couple others who were just digging in their heels. No, the Bible teaches world flat. Bible teaches world flat.
Yeah, Job, basically.
Passe. And by the time you get into the time of Thomas Aquinas and that, nobody but a dolt would think that the world wasn't a sphere.
Also, with that
yeah,
said,
jump in.
So Godless Iowan has just donated $2, and he says that bananas prove the Earth is flat.
Bananas prove the Earth flat.
So I think that means that Ray Comfort.
I'm still pushing for the taco-shaped Earth. I want something that's a little bit more interesting.
I had somebody tell me.
And we got 777. Yes. I clicked a suitcase full of money. Now you give me a
777.
Yes. Suitcase full of money. Yay.
Godless Iowan said no.
Bitcoins. Suitcase full of bitcoins before that collapses.
So they can deprecate in value as you hold them.
Also, if you could hold them, which you can't.
Godless Iowan mentioned that this is Suris' channel, not his. So apparently, I am my channel and Iowan's are so similar that nobody can tell the difference between our two channels. It's very strange.
Oh boy.
I figured we have at the very least a different cadence to our voice, even though we are both.
Cube. Earth is a cube. Oh yeah, that or we could have the what the hell is this little puzzle with all the colors on it? That you spin around. Yeah, old fart brain. I can't quite think of it right off the bat. As a cube that where you find all the big color blocks on there. It's interesting to see the shapes that don't get used in non-globular models. That you get some eccentrics. I suppose here regarding the history, I'll point out that the one wrinkle that pops up until the modern era had to do with Toscanelli's Globe of the Earth. That there was a particular guy, and I can't remember, it was somebody other than Toscanelli. Toscanelli was a map maker, if memory serves me, and if I've brain farted on this one, then it's my fault. But anyway, this guy claimed that Eratosthenes was wrong. This would have been around 1500 or so, 1400. And that he had a better estimation for the Earth that had it way smaller than Eratosthenes' versions. It's such that when you put all the known land on a globe, lo and behold, the Atlantic Ocean was only 3,000 miles wide, and Asia was right out there. Boop. And that was the position that good old Columbus was making use of. And you had a lot of scuttlebutt support for that. In the period leading up to Columbus, you had an awful lot of people who were fishing for cod and probably bumping into Newfoundland and some of these other places. They were going farther out to sea. This was a super secret thing. All that navigation stuff was kept uber secret.
By the way, we have
The trade routes that Prince Henry the Navigator of Portugal had. This was capital offense to trade a Portolan chart. But boy, this was like state secrets computer technology.
We have another super chat, RJ.
That if you let any of this stuff get out, you were doomed, because this was their livelihood. And Portugal had the route around the Cape of Good Hope to the money bags over there in the east, because everything else was being blocked off because of the Turks and the Islamic thing that was preventing the trade routes from going anymore. So the only way was the long way around. So if you could find a shortcut across the short Atlantic Ocean to India, boy, this was going to be killer. And by weird coincidence, as we know, there actually was a landmass 3,000 miles in, but it wasn't the India.
No.
It was the Americas, and the rest was history. So after that episode, it really dawned on them that Toscanelli's map was like wrong, and that they've all stuck with the standard model. And that remained the same all the way down until really you start seeing the modern spurt of flat earthers show up in the 19th century. And these were typically really weird little fundamentalists. They would be oddball, typically Protestants. They were reading the Bible literally. They would be writing up little pamphlets that they would hand out and grump at people. And one of them bumped into Alfred Wallace, the co-discoverer of evolution, because he had a big lawsuit where Wallace, prickly little ass that he was, decided to take on this flat earther. I've forgotten the name, McEwen or some such thing. Again, my brain fart memory on this. But anyway, they were engaged in a lawsuit where Wallace was contending that all of his proofs, and I think it related to a particular measurement of some bridges and particular surveying data, that the flat earther was insisting was proving a flat earth, and Wallace was saying bullpucky, and they went to court for it. And after the legal expenses and all the rest, and I can't remember whether he actually won the lawsuit, but he couldn't get a pay up from the flat earther, and you can see how kind of deadbeats in that they were. But anyway, it's a notorious little sub-incident in the history of mid-19th century science. This was 1850s, 1860s period, and it stays pretty much that way. You have small little blobs of usually hyper-fundamentalist Christians who are flat earthers until we get to our modern surge over the last few years. And it dawned on me, and I was just talking to Suris about this earlier, I think it's because they're video. Because videos don't need footnotes. Videos are instantaneous. Videos are visual. Boy, I got a picture of this mirage of Chicago taken from 8,000 miles away, supposedly. And so you can repeat these tropes, and they're extremely visual. And because videos appeal to an audience that isn't going to be fact-checking things, and there's no sources to fact-check anyway, that can metastasize in a way that the old pamphleteers from the 19th century didn't.
And with that said, RJ, we have two things, two little bits of info that have just cropped up. One, we had another $5 donations from Turtles All the Way Down.
Yay! Said
the Earth is a D20, and all the dinosaurs simply rolled a nat 1. Which, by the way, just so everybody, if everybody here has played even a modicum of Dungeons and Dragons, I have a tiny bit of a story to tell of why Nat 1 is so scary to me. I was playing a paladin at one point with several weapons I had appropriated throughout a very short campaign, and we were fighting on top of a boat, and needless to say, by the end of that particular section, I had rolled enough ones that I walked off the boat with no weapons because I apparently threw them all into the ocean. So,
Don't do that.
So needless to say, me and Natural Ones, we're good friends, but it's a love-hate relationship because they come over very often, and I really want them to stop doing it, but they're always there and they're dependable for me. But that puts our current donations for RJ so far, well, it was going to be at $14.77, and then Iowan decided to screw that up.
Oh, another one. Godless Iowan, $2. How is RJ not the spokesman for micro machines? I'm okay with it.
I mean, if we
Zero also 666. Oh, that's biblical.
Says all these claims about the world shape are wrong. The world is a vampire. Actually, there was another flat earther or not flat earther, but a person in a flat earth amino, actually, who I tried to get on, and he said he could not join the chat, but he wasn't going to be able to support the flat earth claim anyway because he personally believed the earth was in the shape of a duck. But currently, that puts us at 2343 for donations for RJ's channel and equipment for the time being, which is really good so far because that puts us already halfway.
Yeah.
If we were to just get the very baseline, getting a Yeti snowball, that gets us almost halfway there. So we're actually doing really well. Also, on top of that, the next bit of information, while the super chats were coming in and throwing all that out of whack, we also have a guy named Multi Tom Tom. Now, nobody eviscerate him in the chat, please, because here in about 20 minutes.
On.
No, not that. Here in about 20 minutes, he's actually going to ideally be joining us on here live for a conversation. So whatever opinions happen to be had, let them stay with yourself for the time being. We'll address whatever needs to be addressed when we hop on here, and we can talk and pick brains and do all of that. And Iowan has donated another $2, saying that despite all my rage, I am still just a rat. You're right, I have no cage, and I guess that's why my cats love me so much. I am apparently a small rodent. But according to Kyle Curtis from the Non Sequitur Show and Jimmy from Mr. Atheist, I am apparently a bunch of squirrels in a human suit, so I guess me being a rodent isn't new.
That looks pretty good, though. I'm a pusillanimous quidnunc, actually.
People with flat feet have no issues with a flat Earth. Well, my avatar doesn't really have.
Yeah, well,
good
that's
feet.
one of the intriguing things about the depictions of flat Earth. That essentially, they're very North Pole-eccentric. And it's largely because
Australia doesn't exist.
Flat Earthers have traditionally come from the Northern Hemisphere, so they tend to think of it in that context. If more of them came from down under, and there are a few, why not put the South Pole as the center? And why is one privileged over another? So it's just the various projections that began to build up this weird trope, which I haven't researched it enough on my own to find out when they started kind of adopting this big ring of ice wall approach.
I think the ring of ice wall. I think the ring of ice wall came from the artistic depictions of the United Nations flag. They took that and said, "Oh, that must be an ice wall around it," and then developed an entire conspiracy theory around it. Now that's just me. I don't know if that's necessarily the case, but from what I've been able to tell, that seems to be the chronology of what's happened. Also, yes, I believe that is Jim from Atheist Edge, and he says that I have a new stand for my mic. Yes, I do. I finally managed to splurge a little bit and get some more equipment, and it also means that I know that this equipment is really good, so this is also some of the equipment that we'll be sending RJ if we can manage to get the donations in to get that equipment there, because this will increase the fidelity of his channel a lot. Brainery has just said, with a $50 super chat, with a $50, no, is that no? That is $50. I think it is $50. Suris, Battle for Azeroth,
wow!
Horde or Alliance? Horde or Alliance? Okay, so I'm gonna have to be very honest with you, Brainery. I'm gonna be very honest with you. I'm normally an Alliance guy, and the Horde normally I have no issue with. But Sylvanas stepped a little too far with the burning of Teldrassil, killing all of the innocent children there.
I'm sounding like really pathetic, but I assume you're talking about some sort of game.
Yes, World of Warcraft. It is a long-running...
Oh, okay. Yeah, I've never actually played those sorts of things. I once invented a version of Risk that would be like a party war game thing, but never anything on the kind of thing where you had to have tons of little dice rolls and cards and all that kind of stuff that was a little too complicated.
Yeah, for some reason that says 50 for me, but I guess it is 5. That's really weird that it shows as 50 for me, but it's 5.
Yeah, it looks the same way on there. Well, we have no problem with $5.
Yeah, 5 is perfectly fine as well. Every little bit counts. But no, typically for me, I prefer the story for the Horde, but I prefer playing on Alliance. But from what happened before Battle for Azeroth, there's a few issues that I have morally with what Sylvanas did. First of all, she used the Blight on her own people. Secondly, she abandoned Varrock Sourfang, and I'm sorry, the dude's been through enough. I don't think he deserves to be in the Stormwind. When the Alliance is treating you better than the Horde and you're a member of the Horde probably screwed up somewhere. Also, I think Sylvanas is literally just pulling a Garrosh Hellscream. And what happened to Garrosh when he became the equivalent to Adolf Hitler in the story? We sent an entire army to raid Orgrimmar. And what just happened? We sent an entire army to raid Lordaeron. So here we are. So yeah, for me, Alliance. I think that right now they have the moral high ground. I know that previously they didn't with people like Garithos, but here we are. And shut up, Iowan. The Alliance did not deserve the sacking of Teldrassil. That is a flat-out falsehood.
Hey, I just want to know, is there a Starbucks in Deldrassil?
There is not a Starbucks in Teldrassil because it's on a tree.
Well, what the F is that?
Well, even if there was a Starbucks in Teldrassil, it doesn't matter anymore. It's on fire.
Yeah, well, there you go. You know, I tell you, I think the real estate opportunities in this environment are rapidly diminishing.
Oh, definitely. In fact, actually, with what's happened on Azeroth in the past few years that game has been out, we had a giant dragon destroy half of the freaking continents, and one of the continents is completely unlivable because it's been ransacked by undead, and the other one's taken over by pandas. So really, the real estate there, it's not doing too well.
Just out of curiosity, did they depict in that World of Warcraft, is it a flat Earth, or did they bother about shape of the Earth at all?
Oh, no, it's definitely round. Like, you can find full-on globe models of the game inside the world itself. And there's even a section where a god comes down and stabs the world, and he actually has to like hold on to the planet itself to do so, and he screws up all kinds of ecosystems when he does it.
Yeah, don't you know how difficult it is for a god to stand to be able to stab a world? You know, you got to wear the right shoes. You got to make sure that you got the right gloves on because the mountains are scratchy. You know, you got to be sympathetic to them.
Well, I see that Mrs. Snarky has says that it sounds like Charlie Brown's teacher when people talk about games. And Artemis Brain Sample is saying also on top of that, just what? Sorry, unfortunately,
his brain made a popping noise too. Yeah.
Yes,
well, the spelling of it, B-R-A-N-E, reminds me of the cosmological brains, which are membranes, which are the things that possibly spur universes. But that's a cosmological question. We need to get back to flat Earth.
Yeah, we need to get to something a little more basal. a little less intelligent and intelligible, and instead
it's flat Earth. Intelligence does not belong in a conversation about flat Earth. But if we do get our flat earther in later, there are a bunch of questions that I'll want to ask about how they respond to certain kind of data field, how they look at things, depictions of stuff, eclipses, star positions, how big are stars, why do we see spectra on stars the way we do. Why do eclipses happen when they do? How come that gravity stuff seems to be real? And all of that.
How come that gravity stuff seems to be real? Also, yeah, Bud literally just asked in the chat, what is under a flat Earth? Isn't it just question. A turtle?
Yeah, is it like a creamy nougat? Is it like a bunch of 2x4s that say Act 2, Scene 4? I mean, what exactly is underneath the Earth?
So we know that once a lot of math was able to actually be done on the Earth, and we realized that, the shadows here are a little longer based here and here, this world isn't exactly flat because those shadows should not be the length that they are, thanks to math being a very objective framework and not really subject to anybody's whimsy. What do you think actually leads... Also, Godless Iowan says another $2 if Suris picks his nose on camera. You're not getting me to pick my nose on camera, but thank you for the $2, Godless Iowan. That puts us at 32.43.
This is a crude bunch.
Well, mostly it's Iowan. Iowan's the crude one. I've pretty much had a rule that
I was a guest on his show. We had a nice conversation about stuff.
I've noticed that anytime me and Iowan are in the same stream together, it devolves.
Yeah.
I don't know how that happens, but it
that's
always
what
does.
Produced Kent Hovind.
Oh my gosh. No, picking noses on cameras produced Kent Hovind.
Yeah.
And here we are.
Well, I must say that between a booger and Kent Hovind, the booger has more intellect.
True. And it's the same amount of DNA to create both, so let's just make more boogers and less Hovinds.
No booger has ever claimed to have gotten a degree from Patriot University.
True. That is very true.
Yeah, I got you. I got him QED.
Very, very well. So we know that the flat Earth pretty much was debunked years and years and years ago, thanks to math. But yet somehow, you always had people denying a globe Earth.
Yeah.
That was always a thing that
happened. Tiny amount. And you think that but in the age of exploration, Magellan sails around the world. I mean, although he didn't quite make it, but the ships did. And so you got all of these things where they were then in the land rush to explore the rest of the world. And you have to remember how much was not known even in the 19th century, that nobody in 1800 had ever stepped foot on the North or the South Pole. They knew they were there. They were discovering, wait, there's this great big southern continent down there, and it's kind of nippy, and the whalers were bumping into it. But it was really a very, very long time before they started exploring that, and that was beginning to kick in very late in the late 19th century. So in the 1890s and early 20th centuries, you started seeing these nincompoops who were going to go to the poles or bust. And they basically had to tromp across with dog sleds and all the rest. And you found finally in the 20th century, people actually set foot on the North and the South Poles. And it wasn't easy.
No, it definitely wasn't. Now, I am curious, though, which flat earthers do you think were the most prolific ones in getting this idea to kind of proliferate the way that it has recently? I know Jeranism played a decent part in it. But I wouldn't say
I'll
he's the
actually
only
have to
one.
defer to you and people that have followed this, because I could say that I have more important things on my mind than to follow flat earthers, because they're so trivial in the landscape of dumb. They're very visible and prominent in their own weird little way because of the YouTube stuff. Certainly, from what I gather just from Sci-Strike's shows where they put a lot of that up, you got Jeranism because he does a really cute crumbling Earth graphic. I mean, it's really neat. And then Dubé, that anti-Semitic monstrosity. And then there are a few others, but I'll let people who know more about it, who have more bang their head with a ball-peen hammer interest in taxonomizing it. And actually, that would be an interesting subject for somebody to do, would be to go through the systematics of who were the earliest ones in the new surge, and how much do they copy off of one another. This is all a source methods analysis that they would be done on this, but a lot of it would be done on video, and how much of it would still be available. What's the earliest new groups of people? Typically, they don't write books, do they?
Typically, you don't see a lot of books on Flat Earth, mainly because for somebody to compile an actual book would require effort, whereas making a bunch of assertions on an actual video you can put up in 10 minutes doesn't. Trust me, I know. But
Godless Iowan says that we're trying to get RJ a mic. Any super chats go towards purchasing him a Yeti, and by that we do not mean the large white furry creature that lives in Tibet.
No, it was definitely for a Blue Yeti, and so technically the goal would be a little over $130 to cover the mic and the shipping, but anything past that will go to other things that also come with that. So pop filter, stand.
Welcome Lamont says $10.
And $10 has gone in as well, putting our grand total up for the stream for the time being at 42.43.
My head is giddy with enthusiasm over this.
I wish I had been able to set up an actual bar here, but instead I have a notepad document and spouting it repeatedly.
Like the little thermometer they put up on telethons and all that.
Yes, I would love to do that. YouTube can take its 40%. That's fine. If we get our goal within the super chats, I'll provide whatever YouTube did not provide, whatever they take from the super chats, I'll provide that out of my own pocket so we can still get the equipment for RJ. If the amount is sitting in my account in any way, shape, or form before they take their amount, after they take their amount, I don't care. I'll provide whatever amount is there to get that equipment to RJ regardless. So I don't care. For me, a $10 donation is going to look like a $10 donation once it gets sent to RJ, even if YouTube takes their cut. I don't care. I'll take that out of pocket. That's fine. Of course, if we get well over the amount and doesn't need to be the case, then I'm not going to complain. But if we don't quite get there, then I'll provide out of pocket for whatever else is needed too.
It will all go to a project that will not be stupid.
Yes, it will not be a project that gets completely screwed. And I try to be a person who puts my money where my mouth is, which is why whenever I tell somebody, "Hey, go be a patron of this person," you can usually go to my page and see that I'm already a patron of them in some form or fashion.
Yeah. One thing I would say about the triviality of Flat Earth is that it's so trivial that even Kent Hovind criticizes it. It's just off the map. in terms of the typical creationist apologetics, even though historically and even today, the most likely flat earthers you will encounter will be ones who have a deeply religious axe to grind. They're convinced that the Bible teaches that the earth is flat, and that's the framework they deal with. A lot of the younger types, who knows, some of them are just posed, some of them are just trolls that are out there just to sound weird and to say something that is absolutely off the wall and just see how many people will follow it. But they're still relatively trivial.
Brainery has just donated another $10
creationism actually impacts stuff because we have people in government who believe it. So they're making decisions with brains that can think the earth is 6,000 years old. And whereas I don't know of anybody in any government capacity who has been a flat earther in the last 300 years. So they're just a non-event in terms of the fact that they make you want to go, what? But they're inconsequential from a policy standpoint.
Also, Jamie asked if you have a channel. Yes, RJ does have his own channel, and the amount of content is overwhelming, so he's always behind. That's fine. RJ does have his own channel. The equipment is to improve the fidelity of that channel, where he has a show called Evolution Hour he does on Wednesdays. On top of that, he also has audiobook projects that he's going to start getting into as well that require the exact same equipment. So we're trying to kill two birds with one stone.
Isn't it good that I don't do a daily broadcast?
And Secular says he likes how Iowan is the hype man for every stream. Also, I'd like to thank...
I'm okay.
I'd like to thank both Brainery and Malcolm for the $10 donations that were just thrown out as well. And hopefully, Multi-Time, as I said before, let me know whenever you do have the chance when you're able to hop in so we can have our discussion with you on here. And we will play nice. I'm not a big fan of ad hom. I don't think there's any benefit to calling somebody names in any type of capacity for trying to come to an actual truth claim. And
I'm genuinely curious about how they came by the idea. Have they always been a flat earther, or did they come to it? And what sources do they rely on, and how do they go about checking those? And those are all basic methods questions that everybody who has any belief at all has to be able to theoretically defend.
Yep, at least on some level. Also, currently we are sitting at 52-43, so if all else fails, we have at least managed to pick up a Blue Yeti Snowball, which is not a bad microphone.
Wow.
It's the microphone that Kyle Curtis uses on Non Sequitur shows, so it is still a high-fidelity mic, and it is, at the very least, the base minimum required for making the audiobook. So we have at least accomplished that. So if all else fails, there's where we are. Also, Multi-Tom Tom says that he is nearly done eating, so that is good. So we only have to fill in a little bit of dead air. I'm not really dead air. We've got plenty to talk about because there's a whole lot to go into when it comes to this particular discussion. So we know that things have resurfaced because of people like I would assume people like Jeranism, Delano TV, for two completely different reasons, mind you. Jeranism is more, I'm going to bring you an academic video and bring that in. Also, no, Bud Askins is not a flat earther. He's being a Poe. He's a longtime watcher of my channel. Don't jump on him. Also, Iowan says that he's never sends $10 super chats, and his first one is on one of my streams, and that is shameful.
Godless Iowan again, $10. I never send $10 super chats, and my first is on a Suris stream. Just shows how much I support RJ and his content. Thank you, Godless Iowan. Yes, it does the old RJ good to know that I'm not batting into thin air.
And Jamie Sislow has just donated $100 towards RJ's equipment.
Holy moly, Jamie! Wow.
Jamie, what do you want us to do for you? At that point, I'm sorry.
We'll do a lot for you.
At that point, you have made it to where no matter what else happens on the stream, we've afforded all of the equipment RJ needs for what he needs. So what do you want? Obviously, we're still going to keep the discussion of the stream to the topic we're trying to do, but what do you need?
If you got any questions for me on any particular thing that I could address, a thing that I in lieu of that, one point that is connected to is the planetary cosmology aspect. Because once you understood how big the Earth was and that it's a globe, that began to set in motion a whole series of new notions. And you had two separate streams that started to happen in the scientific revolution, one being done by Galileo and one being done by Kepler. And they bump into each other in around 1600 and get into trouble in the case of Galileo. Galileo had to do with the laws of motion. That another part of Aristotle, the same guy that was teaching that the Earth was a globe but not moving, Galileo was beginning to do experiments. Hey, that's a new idea. Let's do experiments that established one of the great scientific discoveries of all time. And it was so weirdly subliminal that no one on Earth had ever spotted it before. And it has to do with how objects fall. That everybody thought, well, Aristotle thought heavy objects fall faster than light ones, which superficially seemed to be the case. If you drop a feather in an anvil, the anvil hits the ground first. But we now know why that's so, air resistance and all of that. But in fact, in a vacuum, they would fall at the same rate. What Galileo discovered was that objects accelerate when they fall. That was a weird discovery to make. And you know how he figured it out?
How did he figure that out?
Oh, it's one of those things where you're going, this is a guy who is anal retentive detailed. There were no stopwatches. There were no stopwatches. And things fall fast. If you drop a rock, have you ever tried to watch it fall to see what it's doing?
It's almost instantaneous.
Exactly. So what he built was an inclined ramp that he could roll balls down to slow down the process. And he used his pulse as a stopwatch.
Also, I just want to point out we got a message on, or a message on Twitter was linked to us. Says that he thinks he's going to buy one of your books and then drive 20 minutes and have you personally sign it. And if you
I will be delighted. If you're 20 bucks, where the hell are you if you're only 20 minutes from Spokane?
I don't know if they are watching the stream right now, and if you are, and you know who you are, who just pointed out the tweet, I don't want to like random dox you. Yeah, at that point, honestly,
I will. If you're either book will be fine, but for this, even though I adore the Phileas Fogg novel and it's a wonderful thing, there's more science in the slam dunk thing, and that one is one that if I need to see a book become widely known and used, it's slam dunk.
Understandable. All right, so Multi Tom Tom says that he is ready to come in. Also, Brian G has just donated $24.99.
Yay!
Good to see you again. Keep on going with the book.
Yes, he pops up on watching the shows all there. Keep on with that book. Can't wait to buy my own copy. And Jackson Wheat and I are doing the Vaporizing Answers in Genesis book. The rocks are still there. We're plowing along on that. He's got his schoolwork and that to do. I'm just finishing up the radiometric chapter now, and oh boy, is Andrew Snelling falling apart.
And Clade Starfish has just donated $20.
Oh, just to prove Australia is real, I have no doubts of that. The second Fogg novel has sets important stuff happening in Australia. They visit Melbourne in 1873. That was really fun finding out what that place was like. Do I digress too much, sir?
Well, I need just a second because for me to send Tom his link, I do need to figure out where I'm sending it, and I'm having some issue with
5 hours from. Oh, are you over in Seattle?
Let me see here. Yeah, I do not see a way to contact you, Tom. Let me see.
As I get over to the coast, quite often, my niece is over there. I'll probably be over there for my birthday later in September. And could theoretically do it that way because if it may be 5 hour drive for you, it's 4.5 for me because I don't stop much. The road to Seattle is almost like programmed into my head, and I have bowels of iron, so I don't have to stop much, and I just poodle along at the speed limit, get into cruise control, listen to music, and away I go. It's a nice, easy road in that, and provided there's no snowfall or anything like that, although there's often construction going on because they've been widening out Snoqualmie Pass into this mega 4 or 5 lane each way. Because if you have enough lanes, even if you get terrible snowfall, they can keep several lanes open because Snoqualmie I-90 is such a giant conduit that you get into shit if all the truckers and stuff that are coming across the pass between the two sides of the state and all that, you can't shut it down much. I remember the ancient days when there was a 2-lane road through Snoqualmie, so this is a different world for me.
Okay, I'm going to. The only way I can see to actually send TomTom a message. Hold on. Maybe I can send him a message on
If he's
here,
on
possibly.
Twitter.
Well, if he's on Twitter, then that'll work.
Yeah, I use Twitter as a major platform because it's a handy thing. It's linear in nature, so you see stuff in real time with the most recent first, and everything tags relatively easily, and you can see the messages. So it's a useful platform for me, and I fight creationists and wooists and Dinesh D'Souza and such like in a variety of ways on Twitter, and try to apply the methods approach at all times, and occasionally rattle my can for my work, and then get dumped upon by annoyed creationists who I was called a deadbeat just a little while ago by one because I have a GoFundMe and try to sell my little self-published book.
I mean, by that particular measuring stick, though, every author is automatically a deadbeat.
Yeah, and we all try to do the things we want to shake the rattle and get people to do the stuff. I will say this: deadbeat I may be, but I am proud of all that I have written. I have never written anything that I did not believe was properly documented and true. And if Paralogs of Fog had been a bad book, I would never have put it for sale, no matter how desperate I was. I really found that when I was done with it, I go, this is actually a good story. I'm quite pleased with this. And I found people who are hypercritical who had to grudgingly admit, God, yes, it's actually a good book. So that's why I kind of went with it. And I love the damn characters so much I can't give them up. Phileas Fogg and Aouda. And Aouda's a kick-butt steampunk heroine. She's the smarter sister of Captain Nemo. She's never a damsel in distress. She is a formidable cookie. And
Okay.
I have a lot of fun writing for her.
So Multi Tom Tom says that he has no Twitter, no Facebook, no BS. And that's wonderful,
Oh,
but it does provide a bit of a problem in us trying to get you on the channel.
yeah.
So I need to figure
Oh,
out what
Adam
is.
Smith, £2. It's not much, but I hope it helps. Adam, every bit helps. That's the whole point of crowdfunding, is that lots of
Yes.
people work together. Nobody impoverishes themselves. Nobody has to sell the grandmother to do the thing. You give a bunch of people working together, a little bit here, a little bit there, and together it makes a difference. That's how it works. The creationists do that all the time, and I envy them that. Boy, they network like mad. And it's sometimes hard for our side to kind of overcome that because it involves a leap of faith. All you see is me. I'm a talking head, and a couple other people say, "Oh, RJ's not an idiot," and you have to decide: am I going to plump down real live money for this guy that's got a microphone and talking about all this shit? So it's something that the wooists jump off the gangplank way too easily off of it. That's why Ken Ham can pull down. Hold your horses on this. He earns almost $200,000 a year.
I have just. So in. See, About page. You know what? That's probably the best way to do it. Is there a way that I can even put this in your About page? I don't know how I can put this in. I sent you a Hangout link through Hangouts, but I don't know how
Yeah,
that would
you can
actually
work
get
on
to
that.
you.
I can fill the airtime while you're struggling to get our flat Earth guest in, so we can talk. I can continue going on Galileo and Kepler.
The Godless Iowan has subscribed. I don't know how to feel about that.
Anyway, that amazing thing that Galileo did with motion, establishing something that acted like a time bomb in thinking. And it was the reason why he was getting into trouble because he came up with the idea essentially of inertia, that an object stays in motion until it bumps into something. And that suddenly pulled apart one of the objections to the Earth rotating. And you still find this argument popping up in flat Earth today, which is why it's like so dated. It's the idea, well, the Earth can't be turning because the water would be sloshing in the tub, and all of that we would feel the motion. Well, no, it's because of inertia. And an object in motion tends to stay in motion unless acted on by a directed force. That became one of Newton's laws. That's right up there in the law category. Now, the thing that produced the big jump was over on the planet side. Kepler, who literally, because he knew about beer barrels, he made one of his discoveries. because the beer barrels that they used in Germany were elliptical. And so he really knew how to measure a beer barrel. How do you measure the inside, how much fluid is inside a beer barrel with a stick if it's an ellipse? And he knew the mathematics of ellipses, so he was familiar with all that. And it suddenly dawned on him, because the old model of circular orbits, and even Copernicus was a circular orbit guy. Circles are perfect. God makes perfect. Oh, we got our guests in.
We do have our guests in. Multi-Tom-Tom, how are you doing today? Assuming we can hear you.
We have a wall.
I do see a wall.
And we have a possible shoulder. Edge of a shoulder.
Yeah, see.
And some IKEA cabinets. Oh, 077. Galileo did nothing wrong. Indeed, he did not. He had a prickly personality, and he didn't suffer fools easily, which got him into trouble because he antagonized people who were in power and capable of being an annoyance. Who eventually, one of them, Bellarmine, became Pope. And that was impolitic of him. But nonetheless, he was an amazingly clever guy. He made a few minor mistakes. Some of his notions on tides turned out to be wrong and that sort of thing. But overall, yeah. But Reese says now RJ can buy more CD porn. Yes, those aren't actually symphonies of Beethoven, but actually CD porn. Yeah, right.
I mean, they're porn for the ears.
Yes, yes. I had vintage stuff. Yes, back in the old. Well, actually. On a completely irrelevant aside, porn existed long time ago. I mean, Romans had porn papyri, and so that old reprobate Tiberius when he was up at Capri, you would have little dirty pictures of people boinking, and you had a lot of sexual things in some of the paintings and all that. And of course, they had lewd penises with bells dangling from them that would be the doorbells and stuff on the brothels. I mean, they were a little bit more overtly even than Amsterdam would be today.
So I will say this right now. First of all, we seem to have lost TomTom. I do not know where he disappeared to. The stream itself, though, we have earned roughly, because obviously YouTube is going to do his calculations later, but roughly $280.49 so far, which means we've essentially purchased. We've got you your equipment. We've got most everything at this point. Now it will be going from the baseline.
All in one effing afternoon.
Yeah,
holy shit!
All in one, which gets
Gary's back.
Which gets you back. Also, we seem to have Tom back. Tom, can you let us know if you are there and if you can hear us?
Yes, I can hear you.
There we go. Awesome. How are you doing today?
I'm good, thanks, guys. How are you?
I'm very glad that you're doing decently well. I'm doing okay. I got off work, went and grabbed food, and started this, so I technically haven't stopped speaking and working yet, so I'm waiting for a point where I can actually rest, but we're not quite there yet.
Okay, so you want to make money, right?
Right now, it's not necessarily about making money. It is a bit of a fundraiser stream for a completely separate project, but the topic itself has nothing to do with any type of actually money gathering. So right now, we're mainly worried about just talking about the topic. We've earned what needed to be done to purchase the equipment that needs to be purchased for RJ. Now we're just talking about the topic.
Yeah, the topic is spreading the truth.
Yes.
Yes.
And the shape of the Earth, yes, in the context. Is the map that you have what you believe to be the shape of the Earth?
Well, actually, none of the maps are very accurate. It's all a depiction of what we believe it to be true, but we could never ever be correct in.
Why not?
Well, I mean, let me give you an example. Japan, right? Japan has snowfalls in the middle of winter, and where it's located, it's not possible. It's not too. It has to be further north to have snowfalls. So.
Oh gosh, Hawaii has snowfalls, and it's in the tropics.
What we have is a depiction of what we think the world is. It's not really accurate. It can never ever be accurate, because.
But what I am saying,
I know you say that, but why? Are you saying that the last 500 years of cartography don't know what the hell they're doing?
Yeah.
Absolutely. Thank you for
in a
doing
word,
it.
yes.
You want to let everybody know where they can find you on
And how have you
YouTube
become
and
so
Twitter?
confident of that?
Yeah, sure.
Well,
so
I don't know if you know
all
the
my
history
social media,
of,
be it Facebook, yeah, just go.
Do you have any
how they made
last
maps.
parting words before
What
we
happened was
Boulder Gunfire.
primarily
Thank you.
it was the
Seed.
British
and Brittany Simon
who made these maps. You know,
I think it's
same thing
us,
happened
I don't know if you
Kylie.
know
No, that's not true.
Well, yeah, I mean,
You wanna be on the
I can
There were
after part of the
German
after show?
cartographers,
We have,
Italian
we use
cartographers,
Zoom for that,
cartography,
so
and for that
we
matter, there
have
are
up to
maps
100
that were
people.
made in
Not that
Asia,
we're going to take 100
and the
people, but
Portoland
if
charts
you
that
are
were
a
made
feminist
by the
or very
Arabs
strong,
and
I've always
others. I
wanted to
mean,
ask
map making is a universal
anybody these
tool.
kind of
It's
questions
not
or
just
talking.
British.
And
yeah,
Imraz,
no,
if
I
you already
understand
have
what
it,
you're saying.
we'll
What
give
you're
you 2
saying
in
is,
case you want to.
you know,
You don't have
these
We'll
maps
start
were
that at
made
10:45, guys.
before the
Until
British,
then, go check out
you
Suris
know,
the
even
Skeptic.
ventured
He's
out
talking flat Earth, and
with their little
if not,
island. But what happened was that it was not exact. The map making is not an exact science. Okay, it was.
How exact is exact?
Well, what happened was these people went out on ships, wooden ships, and you know what they did was it was line of sight. They drew what they saw, okay. And for let me give you another example. You know, Africa, okay, the continent of Africa, they had no idea how wide and how far Africa was. They drew the outline of the coast of Africa.
Well, what would be the
And
first map that would have an accurate width of Africa?
no, listen to me
None?
first. Listen to me.
In the 21st century, we have no maps that accurately depict the size of Africa?
No, well, in the 21st century, what we have today is the exact same thing. You know, we haven't improved on these medieval maps that we have. You know what I'm saying is the land masses are not accurate. You know, it's not very accurate to.
And you insist to say this, but the problem is we do have satellite mapping and we have laser interphotography and we have all sorts of technologies available on this. So your assertion seems to be completely contrary to everything that we have as data.
Well, I mean, satellites are not real.
Oh, and how did you determine that?
I determined it by debunking the moon landings.
And how did you debunk the moon landing?
I debunked the moon landings by saying that it was a movie. It was a movie especially.
And how did you determine that it was a movie?
It was a movie especially commissioned by NASA, and
how did you determine that?
Look, let me finish a sentence for God's sake. Yeah.
Okay.
Let me finish. If it's going to be a debate, give me the courtesy at least to finish the sentence.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Right. What happened was in 1962 or 61 or whatever, President of the United States, John Kennedy, announced that within that decade, the Americans were going to the moon. Okay, and something happened. I mean, you can call it an assassination, but conspiracy theories will call it a conspiracy to defraud the American public. You know what happened was that's another story. I mean, JFK.
Yeah, it's another story, and you're wrong on that one. Get back to how you determined that the moon landing was debunked.
Let me say this: JFK assassination was another story. He was never ever killed. All right, he was part of the elites. That's incorrect. Well, let me say this. You know, he was part of the elites, and what happened was he made a speech in the early 1960s saying that the Americans.
I was alive then. Were you, by the way?
Well, I was born in the mid 60s, so no, not
okay.
Exactly
so I am remembering from actual experience, and you are dealing with it by how?
Well, not actual experience. Well, you were a kid, right? You were a child. You wouldn't understood anything that was going on at the time. You know, I mean, in the early 60s, you were a child, and you were just growing up, and you believed what you've been told. But let me explain. Let me explain what happened. Okay.
Summarize in a sentence why you believe the moon landing didn't happen.
It was a movie.
And how did you determine that it was a movie as opposed to something else? What evidence did you draw upon for this? Did you personally see the movie studio, or did you see somebody who said it was a movie?
It was made by the renowned movie director Stanley Kubrick.
Okay. Okay. How did you determine that? On what basis did you determine that Stanley Kubrick filmed this movie? What sources do you have on that?
Well, if you do some research, there are plenty of evidence out there.
Where what research did you do? How did you determine that Stanley Kubrick, as opposed to Alfred Hitchcock, made the movie?
Well, Stanley Kubrick was involved with these NASA people. You know, there was overwhelming evidence that he was involved. You know,
overwhelming evidence. Did you personally interview Stanley Kubrick on this?
Well, I'm not exactly sure what you're getting at. I'm personally.
How do you know? How did you come up with the name Stanley Kubrick as opposed to somebody else as making this movie? Did you make it up on your own, or did you read somebody who made such a claim? And if so, how did you check that that was accurate?
Well, you have to do some research, and you have to be open-minded. You know, you probably have prejudice, like, because you believe in the ball Earth, right? You have certain prejudices. You know, you believe in the status quo.
Let's get back to the source. Do you have a source for Stanley? When you say to do research, where do you do your research to find this Stanley Kubrick model?
Well, I mean, there's circumstantial evidence. You know, there's Stanley Kubrick was pictured with the top people from NASA. You know, he was.
Excuse me. Lots of people get pictures of all sorts of things. Is it correct to say that you cannot recall what sources you drew on for this Stanley Kubrick claim?
Well, I mean, it's obvious. You know, stop diverting from what I'm saying. What
I'm trying to find out your sources. Do you have any sources for it?
Well, you know, these conspiracies are very well hidden. You know, you have to.
Then how did you find
it? You have to have an open mind to understand these things.
How do you know that the story that Stanley Kubrick filmed the movie is not a conspiracy to convince you that Stanley Kubrick made the moon landing, and that therefore that is the conspiracy fly, not that Stanley Kubrick made the movie? How would you tell the difference between those two?
I can understand if you follow the mainstream narrative. That's fair enough. You know, but
I don't need to follow the mainstream narrative. I'm trying to find out how you determined that your non-mainstream narrative was true.
Well, why is it that there is more than one person? There is more than me who believes in these things, because there are evidence out there. There are research done by other people that you can do. You can just look up.
But if they're doing the same bad research you are, all they're doing is repeating the same bad claim. There are people who think that the Earth is 6,000 years old. There are people who don't think Shakespeare wrote Shakespeare's plays. There are all sorts of people who believe all sorts of things. The question is on what basis that you do so. And did Stanley Kubrick ever claim to have made a movie showing that the Earth was his movie? Did he ever take credit for it?
No, he left clues.
Oh, he left clues. Can you find clues that somebody other than Stanley Kubrick? He is the only one. What kind of clues do you think he left?
Well, I mean, you know, there are plenty. I mean, for example, just look at his movie, The Shining. You know, there's a scene where there's a child who's wearing a jumper, right, which depicts.
And what depicts what? What does the child wear?
Right, he's wearing a jumper with a picture of a stitching of a rocket.
Of a what?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there are clues that leading to.
Oh, wait, well, let me stop on this one. This is intriguing. Let me stop and ask a question here. That you think that Stanley Kubrick, who had an ego as big as all outdoors, that was a hyper control freak, who never allowed anybody to say anything about any of his work that was not accurate and would light into him like a buzzsaw otherwise, that this fellow was so shy, so fantastically quiet, that he gave no indication whatsoever, despite the fact that all of these moon landings were going on with live television, that he never said anything about it at any time during his life, that nobody claimed otherwise on this, and that his sole way of communicating this little nugget is in putting some little coat on a character in a movie made years later that is not about any moon landing. Is that what you think constitutes evidence?
Well, as a critical thinker, what you have to do is you have to put 2 and 2 together, right? And come up
and
with...
And you can't make 5 out of 2 plus 2, but you're trying to.
No, well, 2 plus 2 equals 4, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you have to think critically, which you guys fail to do.
So if I might, if I might interject for just a second, typically my role here is going to be just mainly as moderator now that we have you here, Tom. And I just want to say again, I'm very happy that you're here, because we wouldn't be able to have this type of discussion otherwise. I tried for literally a week trying to get somebody who did have a flat Earth model that they wanted to present, or did have a flat Earth argument they wanted to present. So I'm glad you're here. So if I say anything, it's strictly because I'm trying to be inquisitive. I'm not trying to be antagonistic. If I seem antagonistic, let me know so I can back up a little bit. But I would like to say that isn't there a bit of a difference between being a critical thinker and putting 2 and 2 together on one sheet of paper versus putting 2 and 2 together, but you have 2 on a sheet of paper next to you, and instead of using the 2 that's next to me, I instead use the 2 on a sheet of paper in the opposite room in another apartment across the way? Isn't that essentially what you're doing? Is you're grabbing data that looks similar, we're both working with a number 2 written on a piece of paper, but you're grabbing it from so far away, it's from a completely different math problem.
No, what I did was I researched the history of heliocentrism, and what I found was that it was flawed. For example, all the Greeks were primarily philosophers. They weren't really scientists. They were writing down what they thought what was true.
I'd like to point out that philosophy actually is the baseline that science is built off of. Philosophy is how you develop a methodology, and the methodology is how you build the scientific method. So being a philosopher is the first step to getting you there.
Of him, how big does he think the Earth is? I'm assuming we're talking it's flat. So and is it a circle, or what shape is it? And how big around is it?
Well, nobody can say that for sure, as a certain
Well,
answer.
is it long? Give a ballpark. Is it 1 trillion miles across, or 5? What's a ballpark figure? How would you work that out?
It's interdimensional.
Interdimensional, so it has no size at all?
The Earth, in my understanding, the Earth is a created realm.
Mm-hmm. So it has no size. So when I drive to Seattle from Spokane, and it seems to take me 4.5 hours to get there because it's 280 kilometers or 280 miles or 400 kilometers, that I actually got there instantly, or what?
Well, no, I mean, let me give you an example. Traveling east to west or vice versa, what you're doing is it's like a loop in a space loop, right?
No, I wouldn't say right. You'd have to establish that. But so let me pin it down then. You have no size for the Earth. You have no idea of if the Earth is 1 mile wide or 1 trillion miles wide or any. You have no dimensions whatsoever for the Earth.
No.
Well, okay, I would say this. Would it be fair to say, though, just to play devil's advocate for a second, would it be fair to say if the Earth is dimensional, and that's what you said, Multi-Tom, right? I'm not strawmanning you? Or strawmanning, not strawmanning. If the Earth is dimensional, would it be maybe a little incoherent to add measurements to it?
Yeah, I mean, the circumference of the Earth is given as 24,900. This has to correspond with the 24-hour cycle, because that's That's why it's being given. There's absolutely
24,900 what?
Circumference miles of the circumference of the Earth, right? And there is absolutely no evidence of the radius. The radius is
so
I
hold
gotta
on.
stop
Well,
you there. I gotta stop you there.
The Earth has a circumference of 24,900 miles, but you do also know that in kilometers, that's 40,076 kilometers. So by that, wouldn't it be fair to say that instead of saying that it's 24,000, the number 24 corresponds with the year 24 hours in the day, and therefore we put these two and two together, and that's how we got it. I believe that most of the developed world actually uses the metric system, not the miles system that we seem to have here. So it seems very arbitrary to use that as a claim when we're one of the only nations that actually uses that system. It seems like you could actually pull any
measurement. The size would be the same, independent of how you measured it.
It seems like you would be able to pull any unit of measurement and just find the one unit of measurement that happened to have the numbers that fit what narrative you want to use, and then use that one. Does that sound fair? Because there are multiple units of measurement that we use. Miles is only one of them.
Well, it doesn't matter what you use.
It does matter. It does matter for one reason, because I've done a little bit of study into numerology, and what you do in numerology is you find a narrative that you want to use, and
Listen.
And the thing you do in numerology is you find a narrative, and then you figure out what numbers correspond to the narrative. And if you don't have those numbers, you find a way to fudge the numbers. If 15 times 9 equaling a certain amount doesn't get you what you want, you find everything else that can equal that amount until you find the numbers that you need, and you build the narrative that way. Numerology is a backwards narrative instead of a forwards one. I think you're working with a backwards narrative where you're presupposing a flat Earth and finding everything from the way back.
Let's find out what presuppositions he has. Let's put another benchmark on the field. How old is he?
If you back engineer this, right? Let me give you another example. When Christopher Columbus sailed westward from Europe, he found the Americas, and then Magellan, he circumnavigated the Earth east to west, and he came out the other side and whatever. What they found, what they didn't understand, was that it was in a space loop, right? If you go from east to west, vice versa, you come back to the same place, because that it's in a space loop. And the only way they could comprehend this fact is to make a globe. They have to make it into a sphere. That's the only way they could understand how the world worked. Because
how old do you think the Earth is?
If you go from Europe to east, right, you reach the Asias, and if you go from Europe to west, you come to the Americas, and then onto the Asias. So obviously they had to wrap their minds around this space loop. What's happening.
Okay, well, I'm curious, beyond the space loop, I'd like to know, regarding the Earth part, how old do you think it is?
Approximately 7,000 years.
And how did you determine that?
From the scriptures.
And so, and that you consider absolutely definitive?
Yes.
And why is that? Well,
because the scriptures, right, the Bible and the Quran is the only literature that prophesies the future. It tells us exactly what happens to humanity and what happens to us as a collective in the future. It has been correct.
Did you always believe that?
Sorry?
Did you always believe that?
Well,
were you raised that way, or did you come to this belief later on?
Well, let me give you a little background of where I'm coming from. I was born a Christian Catholic, okay, and I went to church on and off, believing in Christianity. Then about 6 years ago, I found Islam. I read the Quran. I found what Islam is about. And to be honest, if you take away the labels, Jew, Christian, and Islam, it's the same the same relationship. It's the same belief, from Adam and Eve to us today. If you it's very difficult to explain to people who are atheists or who don't believe in the
any evidence that could persuade you that you were in error?
Sorry?
Is there anything that you would accept to suggest that your views were in error?
Well, I mean, if I'm wrong, then of course, yeah. I mean,
well, how would you know? What sort of things would suggest that you were wrong?
Faith. It's faith. You have to have faith. The Bible says, if you have a mustard seed full of faith, then you'll enter the kingdom of heaven.
Well,
that's
so
fine.
No evidence is going to persuade you that you were wrong.
If you
have what evidence have you got?
Hold on.
Well, I'm trying to figure out what evidence you would accept.
The original,
you argue about the shape of the earth, but you don't allow any evidence. You declare that there's no evidence for the size of the earth, when in fact we have lots of evidence for that. But it sounds like you just don't want it to be true.
Yeah, the original question was what evidence would change your mind. It's not. Because if you can tell us which evidence will change your mind, there's a conversation that can be had there. If the conversation is going to be along the lines of the conversation that was had with Ken Ham during the Bill Nye debate, where nothing could change his mind, at that point I would say that there's not much of a conversation to be had, because we're open for our minds being changed. Personally, when I left my faith, one of the things I did was I read other scriptures. I read other versions of the Bible. I tapped into the Quran as well, started reading through that, learned how it was built, learned how the hadith structure actually was set up, so I would know, okay, what is canonical Islam, what is not canonical Islam. Turns out that that's a very muddy question. But whenever I did all that, it was because I was searching for some type of truth. I knew thereabouts what I was looking for, and I didn't personally find it. What we need to figure out is, what are you looking for? What evidence would you need for your mind to be changed? I'm not asking you to leave your faith. I don't want anybody to leave a faith that they're ingrained in for whatever amount of reason, if they have reasons to be there. But I would like to know, when it comes to things that we do understand about the physical world, what evidence would you need to change your mind, TomTom?
Well, I mean, of course, as many of you here, I was brought up believing the heliocentric model, going to school and whatnot. I was taught exactly the same thing as you guys were taught. I mean, when you do some basic research, you find that Newton, for example, he was a philosopher and an alchemist. He
abandoned alchemy eventually, but
he also wrote detailed mathematics, and he did experiments. Are you familiar with the experiments that he did?
His book is called The Philosophy of.
Are you aware of the Principia?
Yeah, principle of. Oh God, I forgot the name.
And what arguments have you used to show that sort of work is wrong, given the fact that all of physics demonstrates that it's still true?
Basically, Newton's book is full of theories. Nothing.
What is your working definition of theory?
Oh, that's not true.
What is your working definition of theory?
No,
now we need that.
That's bearing false witness.
Absolutely no evidence in the book of what he wrote.
Well, hold on.
So do you doubt that force equals mass
definition
times acceleration?
No, the story goes that he was lying down somewhere on the ground, and an apple fell on his head.
We're not worried about the narrative. The narrative is different than.
Are you claiming that force does not equal mass times acceleration?
You can figure out why the apple fell on his head, right? Because
that's a folk tale.
Obviously,
we're not talking about the narrative.
The apple was heavier than the air surrounding it, so obviously density will cause the apple to fall. This is.
Do you know what density relies on?
Do you believe that force equals mass times acceleration?
No.
Why?
And how do you determine? And why don't you think that?
You can't prove it.
You can't. If I take a ton of bricks and drop them on you and calculate the force and the mass involved, and I will discover that force equals mass times acceleration 100% of the time without deviation. Have you ever performed any experiments on that?
density, my dear Watson, density.
Oh,
The brick
density.
is
What
heavier.
is this
The
density?
brick is
Can
heavier
you
than the
name
air.
any
Of course, it's
physicist in the last 300 years who would agree with you?
because it's heavier than the air, right? If it's lighter than air, it will rise. Simple logic.
Okay, but you
Are
do
you
understand that the
claiming that
mechanism
all
behind that.
physicists from Newton on down are completely wrong in all of their work, no matter how many experiments they do, and which you don't seem to know anything about because you know better than they do?
Yes.
Oh, there you go. End of discussion.
Because, like I said, they were all philosophers. They were not real scientists. They
That
didn't
is
go out.
incorrect. Please,
Incorrect.
I
We've
read
already
their
pointed
works.
that out.
I know their works. I know the experiments. Are you claiming that Galileo, Kepler, and Newton and other scientists since did not do actual experiments? Are you claiming that?
Yes.
And how did you determine that? What works have you relied on to be so convinced of that? How much have you read on it?
Our modern world is created by the Royal Society.
How do you know that? How did you determine that?
Do you know, or have you ever researched the Royal Society? Do you know who they are?
Yes.
Okay. What
Where
happened?
did you research the Royal Society? What works did you rely on?
Yes, I have. What happened was
what works did you rely on for the research of the Royal Society? Where did you find this information? What books? What did you rely on? Videos? What information did you rely on?
Well, let me explain. Let me explain who the Royal Society were. Right, in the 17th century, King Charles II, he set up the Royal Society in London, and these scientists, like, for example.
That isn't what I asked.
Edmund Halley, yeah, he went out on a wooden ship. He sailed from London, and what he did was he created the longitudes and the latitudes.
That isn't what I asked you.
Which we use today. He used the North Star Polaris, yeah, and he assumed like the degrees, like from from navigating southward, northward, whatever, from the pole star Polaris. This is how they came to,
That isn't what I asked you. No. I didn't ask you for a history of the Royal Society, that we can get to. I asked you, what sources did you rely on for your history of the Royal Society?
Well, our modern world is a construct of the Royal Society. They created it. The British Empire.
What sources did you rely on for your understanding of what the Royal Society was? I'm trying to find out what sources. Did you get it by Ouija board? Did you get it by a video? Did you get it by a cat coming in and talking to you? What works did you rely on?
The British Empire defeated all the other European nations. For example, the Dutch and the Portuguese.
Suris, is it fair to say he hasn't answered this question?
I would say it's fair to say there's a lot of deflection that's happening here. So what's happening, and originally I wanted to make sure I was doing everything in my power not to strawman you, Tom, but now I'm sitting here thinking that the situation might be a little different. So what's happening is anytime you are being asked a direct question, you're doing what our lovely friend Kent Hovind likes to do. And I know that that's not the best and most apt comparison. Nobody wants to be compared to Kent Hovind, unless you're the subject of one of my latest videos, in which case that person, his favorite person in the world was Kent Hovind. But that's a different discussion entirely. What Kent Hovind does when asked a direct question is he says, well, let me talk to you about this tangential thing. Let me talk to you about this. And he goes on into a diatribe that involves some sort of narrative, some sort of piece of information that he has stored away that he can pull out of his cranium, or more than likely out of his rear. That seems to be what's happening here. When asked a direct question, why do you believe this? You go, well, this information, that has nothing to do with why you believe something. You can say many claims, and you can point out a lot of things that may or may not be true, but you still have not given any hard, solid reason as to why you personally believe them. The solid things that you have said are, I did research, and I looked into this and found it flawed. We still have not heard why you found it flawed. We still have not heard what kind of research.
Sources were.
What I would like to know is the why. I don't care about all of the tiny bits of it. The reason the to understand this argument doesn't work is it's the same reason that I don't accept that argument when it comes to Jordan Peterson.
You understand the present. You have to understand what happened in the past. You know how we got here. You know that's how we know.
That matters.
We're trying to find out. How do you know? Did you live in the 17th century, Multi?
Dude, you can do some research. You can read up on that.
Did you live in the 17th century? Let's give an obvious question. I didn't live in the 17th century. You didn't live in the century. Somehow or other, you got what you think is the history of the Royal Society from some source base. I want to know what that is. Do you remember what source base you relied on in your research?
Because if you can tell us that source base, we can actually use that so we can do the research for ourselves and maybe come to the same conclusion. That's how you will actually convince us. Let us know the sources you used. You can link them. I will be even more than happy to take your sources, link them in the description of this video so everybody can look at them as well and maybe come to the same conclusions.
Yeah, I want to look at them too.
If our goal is to come to some sort of truth.
My sources are from the University of St Andrews in Scotland.
The university in Scotland is not a source in and of itself. There will be cited articles under the university. That's like me saying my source is science, my source is philosophy. That's not the same thing as me saying my source is the Oxford dictionary that actually has
in principle you would have primary sources where the various members of the Royal Society and go back to Halley and all the other different people that have been there over the years would have archives, they would have letters, they would have had their works that were done. You would have commentators on them over many centuries. You would have had the experiments that were being documented. You would have had the letters they exchanged back and forth. And I guarantee you, because history is my gig, I know how much primary source material is involved. It's a huge amount of material. And yet I also know films, and I know Stanley Kubrick's movies, and I know special effects, and I know these other side issues. So not only are we getting the flat earth and transdimensionalism, and also Stanley Kubrick faked the moon landing, and then the Royal Society is somehow the cabal behind all of the world, and that Newton didn't do experiments, and that these other scientists didn't really do experiments, and there's no evidence even to show how big the Earth is and Africa is. This is a train wreck of unsourced claims.
And again, if you have those sources, I would love to put them in the description so everybody can see them, so we can come to some sort of knowledge base. But if we don't have those sources, we simply have to take your assertions. And if we're just taking your assertions, then they're about as good as our assertions. And at which point, which one of us is right? We can provide our sources if you'd like us to.
He seems to have his microphone blunted. Well, anyway, some issues that would be brought up beyond shape of the Earth is how you determine it. How can you determine what's at the edge? There would have to be an edge. And, you know, this, I would be curious to have known, do you think there's like an ice wall around the Earth, Multi, or some other configuration? Or is it just some kind of transdimensional thing where you come back to where you started from, like some Mobius strip?
Well, in my opinion, the AE map, or the Gleason's, which is the pizza pie map, is not a true depiction of this Earth, you know, because I think it's a 2D version of the globe. You know, it's a North Pole centered projection, which is not true in my opinion. You know.
Okay. Do you think a South Pole projection would be more accurate? That the actual center of, and is there a center of the Earth? Is there a spot that if you were standing there, you would be equidistant from the edges of the Earth?
Yeah, I believe it to be the Middle East. You know, I believe it to be Mecca.
Okay. And is this because of your religious faith or from some scientific observation?
Both.
Okay. Now, how do you account for why the stars that are seen in the southern hemisphere aren't the same as the ones in the north?
Because you know, you're looking at a completely different sky.
And how can that be on a flat Earth?
because what you observe is your local vision, your local sky. For example, you have a 360 degree. Say you're standing in the middle of a field in I don't know, Kansas, right? All you see around you is like a 5 mile, if that, of the total sky, which is absolutely nothing comparing to the world. What you see is the local sky, and it's local to you. Yeah. And if I'm
Have you worked up an ephemeris? Can you predict eclipses in your model?
Yeah, eclipses are in cycles. Everything in the sky is cycles.
Yeah, but have you worked out in your model to where the planets and the sun and the stars are, such that by your flat Earth model you can account for why eclipses occur the way they do? Because the heliocentric model can do it perfectly. But have you done that?
Well, first of all, you have to understand that there are no planets or sun or stars, right?
And how did you determine that?
They're all luminaries. They're just lights in the sky, right?
How did you determine that?
They're all lights in the sky, and
you've told me what you believe. How did you determine that?
What happens is everything in the sky is cyclic. To determine the shape of the Earth, you don't look up. That's a non.
How did you determine that? Not what you believe.
You don't look up to see what's on the ground. Yeah, the sky and the Earth are two.
Once again, Suris, you can't answer the question. We're getting a Tortugan deflection.
That does seem to be what's happening.
And the Earth are two different entities. Do you understand that?
Oh, I understand that you believe that. I say that that's pseudoscientific twaddle.
So why do heliocentrists?
How did you determine that?
Why do heliocentrists look up to determine this? To determine the size of the Earth? Tell me that, please.
They don't. Heliocentrism is independent of the shape of the Earth. We've known the shape of the Earth for 2,500 years, and it's done by direct measurement.
Heliocentrism, right? They depend. They presuppose that the Earth is a globe.
No,
there's not a presupposition.
They know the Earth is a globe, and they build on that understanding. How do you deal with the experiments that have measured the size of the Earth?
How do you know the Earth is a globe?
How do you deal? Are you claiming that no one has ever performed experiments to measure the curvature of the Earth?
Yes.
So Eratosthenes did not do his experiment, and the people that were on programs that have physically measured the curvature on lakes using lasers and interferometers, that those things didn't happen?
Well, with regard to Eratosthenes, what happens is like, say you're in Egypt, you're standing on Egypt, and you measure the angle to the sun, and someone is in India or Australia or wherever, and they also measure the angle to the sun. It's going to be difficult. It's going to be different because of perspective. They're all obviously
have you studied any of the Arabic science on perspective?
Let me finish. They're both on different points of the Earth, and the sun is at a completely different angle. So obviously they're going to get different readings, right? This is what heliocentrists don't understand. They can't. It's very simple. Occam's razor is what flat earthers use. You know, it's very simple.
There's a lot of things
you
simple
use a razor,
about
but Occam isn't it, sir.
Every simple explanation belongs to flat Earth. You know, it's so simple that you guys think too much of it. You know, you
multi.
You're the one who's having to go to.
Are you claiming that you have never seen an experiment performed that measures using modern tools on large lakes that physically determine the curvature of the Earth by direct means and that confirm the physical size of the Earth? Are you claiming that no one ever in the history of this century has done that?
Yes, I'm claiming that.
Then you are an idiot, because I saw exactly such an experiment depicted perfectly, directly filmed in Stephen Hawking's BBC show just a few years ago. So I'm supposed to pretend that I haven't seen that because you haven't?
That's been debunked. You know, it's
where
debunked by who?
Where,
who
when,
debunked
and by
this?
whom?
An experiment you have not seen was debunked by whom?
It was it was false. You know, it was.
But why? Who?
It was,
Where?
it was filmed with
Citation.
certain criteria in mind. You know, they filmed it to deceive.
Citation.
Who debunked it?
Well, there's videos out there. You know,
No,
you
it's
only
not
have
that
to-
there's videos out there
And
because
so
there's.
you-
Hold on.
Take out your Quran or your
If-
Bible and swear upon it at imperilment of your immortal soul. Do you claim, A, to have seen the experiment that was done on the Hawking video, and B, have you tested out and confirmed that any video that you claim to have seen that debunked that specific work, that you have performed those two things, A and B? Can you say yes to those?
Yes, I claim it.
So you claim. So who was this? So what? How did this video that you claim debunked the performance on BBC? How did you claim that they debunked it?
Well, it wasn't BBC. It was actually on the Discovery Channel. They are the ones who financed it, and it was on their channel initially.
I saw it on Channel 7, and it was from the BBC. I saw it on PBS here. The point is, describe what the experiment was, since you claim to have seen it. Describe what they did.
Well, it's to do with the laser. You know, it was they claimed it was curving, but actually the helicopter.
Describe the experiment. It's easy to describe. I can do it in a few sentences. Let's see if you can do it, since you claim to have seen the video.
Well, I've seen the video. What happened was that, you know, the end of the video, they had a helicopter, yeah, which was meant to be level with the lake, but it wasn't actually level with the lake.
Oh, it doesn't have to be level with the lake. This is the point. Describe what they did in the experiment. It was a two-stage experiment. One involved, I'll even lead you through a bit. One involved a laser and a boat. The second one involved a telescope and a helicopter. Describe what they did in the experiment.
Well, I just told you, and it was all botched up. You know, it was.
No, you're accusing it of being botched up. Describe what the experiment was intended to show, what they showed on the show, and then we can get to whether or not you can debunk it or not. Explain to the audience what was done on the experiment.
The experiment was intended to show the curvature of the lake, but they failed.
And how did they do that?
They failed.
No. You say they failed. Describe what they did in the experiment.
The laser itself was showing to be lower, but actually, what happened was the boat they were in, and the board they were showing was higher than the water level.
What was lower and higher? What happened in the course of the show?
For God's sake, you know, the lake was not long enough to show the curvature of the.
Oh, but it was. What are you? You're an amazing character. This is fascinating.
Do you know a bloke called Soundly? Do you know that he said that he can prove that the lake Pontchartrain was curving?
Let's not talk about another subject. We're sticking with the hitching, with the Hawking video. The laser and what was the setup that was done? What features were constructed on the experiment to try to show the curvature of the Earth? You don't seem to be able to describe that. You simply declare that it didn't do what it was supposed to do. What were they trying to use as the experiment? It's so bloody easy. A child should be able to explain it.
I just explained it. You know, they
No, you didn't. Okay. Let's do it this way, because I'll give my explanation, and the audience can decide what was going on. The first order of business was to set up a laser and a boat that was right on the shore. They had a stick sticking up from the boat, and the laser was not moving, so it's hitting very low on the boat. And as the boat then goes out onto the lake, the laser, which is not moving, is getting higher and higher and higher on the stick. Why? Because the boat is going down along the curved length. Eventually, they reached the stage where they were so high up on the damn stick that the laser was going to leave that. That was the first stage of the argument. And they could write out how far away they were from shore as to, and how much of an angle. That's trigonometry. That was the first stage. The second stage, because the laser would attenuate over too much of a distance, they would switch to a telescope that was again fixed, a fixed straight line, it's not moving, where they bring a helicopter in on the field. and way out on the lake. And what they do is they bring the helicopter up so that it is now in that line of sight of the telescope. It's along a fixed line. They are at that point just over the lake. They then fly out while staying visible, staying at a fixed altitude above the landscape. Eventually, they are no longer visible in the telescope. They are at the same altitude in their altimeter above the land that they were before, but now they're invisible. So they then climb and climb and climb until they become visible on that straight line of the telescope. And now they're way higher than they were before over the land. That's another set of numbers, more trigonometry. The audience, the people that were involved in this, who were not scientists but just knew basic trigonometry, were able to calculate from those two observations a pretty damned accurate definition of the size of the Earth that matches Eratosthenes and all that, all from that basic information. Now, are you claiming that any of that stuff, that those people involved in that were liars, that they were duping, that they were not writing the numbers down correctly? And if so, what evidence and what sources do you rely upon to contend that you are going to libel those people from afar? Make your argument against that.
Well, a YouTuber called D Marble, he did the same kind of experiment, laser experiment over 10 miles over the lake. And
forget Pontchartrain. I don't care about Pontchartrain. This was in the United States. This was a lake in the United States, not Pontchartrain.
This was about a week or maybe 2 weeks ago, all right? A YouTuber called D Marble, he did the same experiment, the laser experiment over 10 miles, you know, and what he found was that he can find the laser at a straight angle, you know, there was no dip at all, right?
No one's claiming a laser can dip. It's a straight line. Are you claiming what things that were depicted in that PBS program are inaccurate? What of that information do you claim is false information?
Well, I mean, the laser was not accurate, and it wasn't shooting straight.
What do you mean the laser wasn't accurate?
Well, that's what the debunkers, you know, were saying, and it wasn't.
This laser didn't point 10 miles. It only pointed about a mile. It only needed to be accurate for a mile in that stage. Are you claiming that another experiment, and by the way, was this video that you were talking about, this second one, was it done by a flat Earth person or somebody else?
Well, it doesn't matter who did it, but
it does matter. Just yes or no. Is it done by a flat Earth defender or not?
It was over 10 miles, you know, more than 1 mile.
Was the guy that did the 10-mile one a flat Earth defender or not?
What do you expect? 1 mile experiment or 10-mile experiment? Which is better?
10-mile experiment, by definition, the reason why they didn't use a laser on the second one is because the laser attenuated too much. It wasn't useful. It was you couldn't see the image at that distance. That's why they used a telescope. Are you claiming telescopes don't look in straight lines and the lasers don't fire in straight lines?
Dude, the D Marble experiment is way much better. Right, over
way
10
much
miles.
better.
Determined that it was way much better. What fact checking did you do of D Marble?
Listen for 1 minute, yeah. Over 10 miles, there is no, repeat, read my lips, no
I can't see your lips to read. How did you confirm that D Marble was telling you the truth? Why is he not part of the deep conspiracy?
You can't fake it, you know. It's on film.
How? You're claiming the BBC faked their test. Why can't D Marble fake his?
Well, watch the two videos. You know, you can make up your own mind. You know, there's
Suris, have you seen the D Marble stuff?
I have not personally seen the D Marble stuff, but I have watched people.
We should put that on. We should have that on SciStrike's one of SciStrike's things, and we can go look at it.
Definitely.
So find a link. Multi, give a link to one of D Marble's, the one that you think is the real killer. Then give it out so that we can view it on SciStrike show, because this sounds like just really exactly the point. By the way, in the video, did it give any source documentation in the description?
Well, I mean. At this moment, we're going around in circles. You know, there's absolutely no curvature, right?
Yeah. I don't think there's any way to persuade you, and you're not presenting any source data that's going to be able to likely persuade us, because you have to convince us that all the information that we know that you deny doesn't exist.
Your gods, right? The people who you rely on, NASA. Even they claim they can't.
Did you hold on? Did you just claim that there are gods?
Well, you all worship NASA, right?
No, I don't
That is
worship
false.
anything. First of all,
That is bearing
Actually,
false
actually,
witness,
hold
and
on,
if you
hold
ever
on.
say that, you are bearing false witness, Multi.
I will say this. To be fair, bearing false witness is more about testimonials in court. But in reference to here, I don't want to equivocate. So I would like first, Tom, could you please give me your definition of the word worship as it pertains to God, so we can have this part of the discussion? Because your claim is now.
My tea. I'll be back in a moment.
That is perfectly fine. But your claim is now that we worship NASA. So please give me your working definition for the word worship, and we can have this conversation.
Well, worship is a faith-based system. It's not.
Worship does not have to be a faith-based system,
right.
But is it strictly a faith-based system by your definition? Because if that's the case, I'll work with it.
The scriptures are very, very clear. If you have
not really, they're incredibly vague. But
I'm
not wanting the scriptural definition because they're incredibly vague and vacuous, and you can insert whatever you need there. That's why we have different. That's why we have different denominations of both Christianity and Islam. So I'm not wanting any answer that says the scriptures say this, unless you are going to say what your actual definition of worship is. If it's sourced from the scriptures, that's fine. But I don't care what the scriptures say here. I care what Tom says. So Tom, what do you say worship means?
Well, with regard to NASA, right?
In regard to God. Because you've claimed NASA is God, so now we have.
Let me talk.
I'm going to let you talk, but here's the thing. Here's the thing.
Let me answer.
If you say something incorrect, I'm going to interrupt, because by the time we get to a minute or a minute and a half after you've said the wrong thing, it's going to be that much harder to address it. So first of all, I asked in relation to God. You said in relation to NASA. No, we're going to stay where we were. In relation to God, what is your definition for worship?
I've already answered that.
But you haven't.
Worship is based on faith. It's not based.
So is worship a noun or a verb?
Same thing as what NASA has done ever since.
No. Is worship a noun or a verb? I asked you a binary question. I asked you a binary question, Tom. How is it so hard to answer a binary question? Is, in your definition, worship a noun or a verb? Is it something that you have or something that you do? Because if it's a faith-based position, it's a noun, and if it's an action, it's a verb. Which is it? Is it a noun or a verb? It is a binary question. It cannot be that hard to answer.
Well, I'm trying to answer you, but you're not listening, are you?
I asked a binary question, which requires an incredibly simple answer. It does not need that minutia. Minutia is in the definition. I'm not worried about that. I asked a binary question. There's definitions behind every single word and usage you can have in the sentence you respond with, and we can get to that. Start with the answer to the binary question.
Okay, let me answer then. You keep asking and asking and asking. I'm trying to answer you, but you're not listening. Worship is faith-based.
Is it a noun or a verb, Tom?
Worship is faith-based.
It can be faith-based as either a noun or a verb. It can be faith-based as either a noun or a verb. I'm fine. Call it faith-based. That's fine. We're here. That has another conversation, and I'm perfectly fine with that conversation that it will entail. But now that you said it is faith-based, I know what it's based on. That's fine. Let's agree, for the sake of conversation, it is faith-based. Now that does not need to be restated. We're agreeing worship is faith-based. Okay, hold on. That's a separate part of this conversation. Okay, hold on. You still have
no, we do not worship NASA. We do not worship the National Bureau of Standards. We do not worship AOL. We do not worship the Flying Spaghetti Monster. We do not worship any of those.
I have asked you a question.
Based thing from NASA.
Okay, hold on. You're diverting very, very far. So we've agreed that the definition, because I'm not going to
He'll
move from
deny
this
all
now that
facts,
we're
too.
here. We've agreed that the definition of worship is going to be surrounded or based on faith. Yes or no? Requires a one-word answer.
Dude, I've already answered.
Okay, that's not a one-word answer. It's not a one-word answer.
Is faith.
Okay, so yes.
Faith.
So it is a yes.
Entirely.
It is a yes. Okay. Now that we've agreed, we can now move on from that part of the conversation. We've agreed it's faith-based. Okay. The next question is, there's two questions that need to be asked here. And obviously you're having a trouble answering the first one, so I'm going to ask you the second one, and then we'll go back to the first one because you haven't answered it yet. What is your definition of faith? And remember, saying the scriptures are very clear on this, if they're incredibly clear, then you can give me an incredibly concise answer. What does faith mean to you in regards to worship?
Well, faith to me means believing in a creator, you know.
So if we believe in a creator, at what point does NASA factor in here?
Because they haven't ever, in their history, ever produced one piece of evidence. You know, it's all faith-based.
You assert that. You
The
assert
moon
that,
landing-
but where
the moon landing is a movie that's given.
we
to
have
Tell
plates.
us about the moon rock.
We have
Yes, it's all
plates. We
computer
have plates
generated.
on the moon that we can
Tell us
fire
about the
lasers
moon
up to
rocks.
and have them bounce back to us.
The spacewalks
But-
are filmed in a pool.
You know, that's fine.
So
you know what?
claim. Tell us
Actually,
about the
actually,
moon
hold
rocks.
on,
That's
RJ.
physical evidence that was brought back for the moon. Tell us about that.
Well, hold on, RJ. Hold on. I'll grant him that the moon.
The moon rocks turned out to be petrified wood.
I'll grant him.
Oh.
I'll grant him that the moon
my
landing
God.
was fake.
Please, Tom, please put a source up for that. I want to see your source
and
for
I
the
would
notion
love-
that the moon rocks are petrified
And I would
wood.
love to have that.
I beg you to put that source up.
I have many methods you can use to contact me after this to send me all of your sources, and I will gladly link them in the description so everybody can see them. So that's an open thing. Any source you have, I will put in the description, even if it fills the entire thing up. And if it fills the entire thing up, then I will provide a Google Drive link to a Notepad document with all of your sources. If you have that many, I will provide as many sources as you can give. But I'm not moving away from this. So to you, faith requires a deity. So we're not working with the definition of faith usually posited by modern apologetics, where faith is a type of confidence. If you had said faith is a type of confidence, I may have agreed with you, because there is a level of confidence we have in scientific literature. But that's fine. We'll go ahead and work with the deity. We have one half of the issue now. Now there's another half of the issue when it comes to your word worship. We now have that it has to do with a deity. And now that it's faith-based and has to do with a deity, is this worship an active thing, or is it a stagnant thing? Is it a verb or a noun? How are we using this word in the English lexicon?
Well, that's very difficult to describe because...
How is it difficult to describe if a word is a noun or a verb?
He says in the scriptures that, you know... many are called, but only few are chosen. You know?
Okay, but that has nothing to do with faith, especially if something's chosen, because at that point the faith is being granted to you. It's not a level of confidence in any kind. We're now in a completely different. We're now in determinism, which is a completely different conversation. We ought not have that conversation when you're having such a difficult time answering a binary question. So let's Zero has posited something very, very important in the chat. I will provide you a working definition of verb and noun. To steal from my 90s heritage, a verb, it's what you do, and a noun is what you are. So is worship something that is, or is worship something that's done? Is it active, or is it stagnant?
Well, I mean, for atheists, and it's very difficult to understand.
It's the same word for both
explain.
of us because you're using the same word for both of us. It's going to have the same meaning between the two. If you're going to go as far as to say NASA can be conflated with a creator of some kind, then you're obviously using the same words and the same definitions for both parties. If you're using the same words and same definitions for both parties, we're going to continue on that trend lest we delve into equivocation. So, worship, verb or noun, because I'm not leaving this until it's done.
Well, let me explain.
You've
when I try
tried
to
very
explain,
hard to explain and
listen,
incredibly.
you tried to cut me off.
I'm not
You
trying to
don't let
cut
me
you off.
explain.
Well, here's the thing. Whenever you say
what
"let
I'm
me
trying to
explain,"
say, I'm trying to make you understand.
okay, here's the thing. You don't understand because you don't understand the usage of words.
You've
demonstrated this
Go back to the
clearly.
beginning, from the before
Beginning
the
of what?
creation of
Okay,
heaven
how
and
does that
earth,
have to do with anything? How does that have
Go-
anything to do with worship, though? How does that have anything to do with this? I asked you a binary question. You couldn't answer a yes or no question before, so we reformatted the question so you could answer, and now you can't answer a verb or noun question when it has to do with the English language that you at some point learned, because you are speaking it rather fluently, I might add, to an extent. For me, I learned what a verb and a noun was when I was in my first grade. At what
and
point?
even the dictionaries make a distinction between. They put the little V or the little noun next to words, and then there's A for adjective and all that.
So, I need to know what your working definition of this. You need to make this word make sense to me, because otherwise we're going to be using a very sloppy, very, very rotund version of a word instead of a very finite, razor-sharp version of a word when we're dealing with a situation where definitions are incredibly important. So, I ask again, is this worship something we're actively having to do? Or is this worship something that simply is present?
I'm trying to answer the question, but you guys keep cutting me out. It's
No, this is Suris's point, not mine. I have another question I'd like to get into after that one. So once that's
okay.
settled.
Let me explain. It's very difficult to understand for people who have no faith. Okay.
But no, hold on. I have to interject again. Every time you're wrong, I will interject. You claimed earlier in the conversation, we have faith. And now, suddenly, the verbiage you're using is, it's very hard for people without faith. So do we have faith or do we not have faith? If we have
A
faith,
or not A?
If we have faith, cool. If we don't have faith, cool. In both situations, we can move on from the conversation, but I refuse to let the level of cognitive dissonance required to have those two sentences so close to each other in the timeline on this video. My voice broke because I'm not a good presenter. I'm a terrible YouTuber. It's very hard for me to have a conversation where what you said 5 sentences ago directly contradicts what you said now. So, for people like me and RJ, do we have faith or do we not have faith?
No, you don't have faith.
Okay, so we don't have faith in NASA. Because if we don't have faith...
Let me explain for the umpteenth time, right? Before the creation of heaven and earth, right? The creator, let's call him God, right?
Yeah,
let's call it Smurgle. Let's not use
him
labels that have baggage. Let's call it Smurgle.
We can use
God.
whatever. We can use G.
God.
We'll use G. That is the common usage of the term G in philosophy is to be vacuous enough to allow for any God. So we'll use G.
Yeah, we'll go with G for the moment.
Let me explain so you might understand. You might learn something. Let me explain. Give me at least 2 minutes, right?
Okay, you have 2 minutes starting now.
2 minutes.
Uninterrupted.
Before the creation of heaven and earth, God created the souls, the human beings, billions and billions of them, right? He separated them from the saved and the unsaved, okay? So there was 2 groups. And then he gave them free will, which means those who are saved can fall at the end, and those who are unsaved can be saved through their faith and through their good work, their charity, their belief in God, through their goodness. Okay, so this is what you people don't understand. You don't understand the difference between free will and
that's a long way from NASA.
Well, that's what I'm saying. NASA is the same thing. NASA has never ever produced one piece of evidence. All they have is movies and CGI, computer generated images, and bullshit. And you guys believe in that. That's those who believe in anything other than God is from Satan. So
is he 2 minutes yet?
Anybody who doesn't believe in God are Satanists. Simple facts.
I'd like.
So-
I have a spot on my bingo card that still needs to be filled in. Multi, what's your Tom? What's your view on evolution?
My view on evolution is bullshit.
Okay, how did you determine that?
Well, it was created by a guy from the 19th century. He went off to the Galapagos Islands,
Mm-hmm.
and hold on, was something wrong here?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the guy has a name. Have
He-
you forgotten that one?
Yeah, let's call him Darwin. Okay.
Yeah, let's call him that because that was his name. How about
Yeah,
Wallace?
let's call him Darwin. He went up to the Galapagos Islands. He observed some animals and birds and creatures that were living there, and he came to the conclusion that the selection of what's the word? Selection of species, natural selection of species. The strong survive.
No, not quite, but
Well,
what
yeah,
about Alfred Wallace? What was his view?
Well, Alfred Wallace was an idiot.
What was his? What do you know about him?
He was on the verge of insanity.
Alfred Wallace?
Yeah.
Are you confusing him with somebody else?
No.
What do you think you know about Alfred Wallace?
I know that he was on the verge of being insane.
No, at no point was Wallace ever on the verge of insanity. No, that's not true. Wallace is directly connected to Charles Darwin. Do you not know that?
Yeah, they came up with the same thing. They came up with the.
What was the thing that impressed Wallace so much? What did he see that impressed him so much? He never went to the Galapagos. He was in a different spot of the world.
Well, they were in the same club.
No, they weren't in the same club. In fact, there were only 1 or 2 times they ever even met physically.
Yeah, but they were in the same club.
No, they weren't in the same club. Let me ask another question then. What do you know about the reptile mammal transition data?
They were scientists, so they were in the same club.
What do you know about the reptile mammal transition data? This is a huge block of evolution data that comes after Darwin and Wallace's time.
It's impossible.
Impossible. Tell me about what you know about it, though.
Well, what I know is a reptile cannot ever become a mammal. It's impossible.
Okay. How do you deal with the therapsids?
Well, I mean, going back to creation, everything is created exactly as it should be.
How do you deal? Where do the therapsids fit in? Do you know what they are?
I have no idea.
You have no idea. So do you read much paleontology, Tom?
Only the bullshit ones, yeah.
Oh, so it's all bullshit to you. Do you know? So you claim as a blanket statement, like you claim NASA is all bullshit, all paleontology work doesn't matter, and it's all like fake, or what?
Yeah, I mean, all the bones, the bones that supposedly were collected, are all fake. They're not real.
Yeah,
bones.
all of them were fake. Every single one of them. Every single working paleontologist. Would you like to say that to Paul Sereno to his face, or better yet, Lutheran minister Robert Backer, who would probably punch you out for accusing him of fraud?
Well, correction, not all, because I believe that there were gigantic animals like before the pre-flood era. You know, before the
And
before
when
the
was
flood.
that flood?
And when was the flood?
Before the flood was actually the Pangea, which I agree with. There was Pangea.
When was that? When was this flood?
Flood was around maybe 5,000 years ago.
So we're not talking about
and
Young
describe the flood layer where you live. Do you spot a flood layer there? There's none here in Spokane.
Well, what happened was before the flood, it was Pangea. All the continents were.
I'm talking about at your feet. Don't you look outside? Describe where. Have you identified any flood layer where you are? I will tell you there is no global flood deposit here in Spokane, Washington. We have lots of deposits caused from lots of different geological features, and a global flood is not one of them. Did the spigot turn off here?
Adam and Eve were 90 feet tall.
What? What was 90 feet tall?
Adam and Eve.
We're 90 feet tall. I want a source on that.
Discount
one too, because
Hovind makes so much more sense
creating
now.
an entirely new creationism here. I want that, and I want the source on the moon rocks being petrified wood. I've got to have those sources. Please, Tom, I urge you, after the video is over, if there's you can post comments and stuff on the video, right, Suris?
Yes, I can post comments on the video.
First human being.
I want those sources. I plead for you to put the links up to those 2 points, because I want to research that. Those are neat.
The first human beings were 90 feet tall. Adam and Eve were 90 feet tall. There were 2-mile plants and trees. There were huge animals which you call dinosaurs.
Did they have any ALUs in their genome?
So that is possible. Before the flood.
So all the ALUs that are in our genome are there because of they were in Adam and Eve, right?
The Earth before the flood was a completely different world. There was water above us in the sky. There was the water above the sky became the deluge. That caused.
Yeah. What sources have you relied on for this, Tom?
Scriptures and literature from the prophets and messengers of God.
Just that? No creationist literature at all? Laid out in the way you became it as an adult, or was it laid out different than that? This is embryology. Do you know anything about that?
Well, each species have their unique.
I'm talking about our species. In fact, all mammals do the same thing, without exception.
Species, whether bird, reptile, mammal, amphibian, or anything else, they have their own unique code. That is how we are born, right?
This is a question about basic biology, and I'm curious to know whether you know anything about your own toolkit, the thing that you've been using. You have your mouth moving, my mouth's moving, we're hearing, we're using our ears, all of this. Do you know about the bones that are in? Do you know about the bones that are in our skull and jaw?
There was no way that I was coming out as a snake. That is impossible.
Oh, I'm not talking about snakes here. Do you know any? Can you describe the bones that are in your jaw? Do you know what they are?
You being stupid. This is absolute nonsense.
No, it's not. I'm trying to find out.
I have no idea which one of us is spouting absolute nonsense, but I'm sure one of us is.
Yeah. Let me put the shortcut to it. In our embryos, and this has been known since the 1830s, so this is not some news bulletin. All mammals start out with the jaw structure in the reptile layout, and in the course of that, the dentary bone expands until it hits the squamosal bone in the skull, and that becomes the standard adult mammal layout, which is what makes us unique. Those extra bones that were part of the reptile jaw layout are then pulled up into the middle ear, which is how we hear. We not only know that from the embryology and the genetics, but we also literally have fossils that track that process, including ones that were predicted in advance uniquely by paleontologists and that no anti-evolutionist has ever accounted for.
Well, like I said earlier, there's no way. You cannot prove me wrong. There's no way.
We can't prove you wrong because you never look at the data.
I would come out as a bird. I would come out.
Hashtag Tortugan.
There, Tortugan alert. Hashtag. Let's make that trending, gang. Tortugan alert. See how handy it is?
Okay, so I do have a question. So typically, it's very rare for me to find somebody, because you said that you are a follower of Islam. You believe in the Quran, correct? Originally a follower of the Bible.
Yes.
Okay, so it's very rare, at least to me. You normally do not find young Earth creationist. You usually do not find that in Islam. Typically, that's that's almost exclusively to Christianity, at least here in the States. How do those two things square? Because almost every other Muslim I've spoken to is an old Earth creationist. You are the first young Earth creationist Muslim I've dealt with.
Yeah, well, first of all, you have to take away the labels. If you take away the label Jew, Christian, and Muslim, what you find from the beginning of time to today is two sets of people, either the believers or non-believers.
That's like trying to categorize everybody as atheist or theist, but we've actually, me and RJ had a discussion earlier about how you can't do that, because there are actually very hard philosophical definitions for multiple camps.
I'll put in this little caveat. The Saudi Arabia version of Islamic creationism is a flat Earth model and is kind of young Earth creation. Most of the rest in Iran today, they teach standard evolution and all of that science. So there's a long range. But yeah, he is unusual for being a young Earth creationist in the Islamic community, who have a better grasp of science, frankly, than he apparently does.
Well, what happened was most Muslims today are also brainwashed into thinking, about the modern world, like in scientific world. They've been brainwashed into thinking the world we live in is a heliocentric model. They don't think outside the box. For example,
well, we think outside the box, and we think outside your box too.
The Quran.
Your box is
Bible,
6,400 to 7,000 years old.
Explicitly,
it's very small.
A flat Earth cosmogony. It's creation is a flat Earth creation. Ball Earth is a heliocentric model. It's impossible logically.
No, it isn't.
That's the same verbiage that people like Ray Comfort use. In fact, actually, I'll quote Ray Comfort. Yeah. Ray Comfort's exact quote that he uses is, "How can you believe the scientific impossibility of a universe created ex nihilo?" Except that there's not a single scientist I've dealt with, and I've dealt with PhD ones, including ones that are in fact theists, who actually believe in a universe created ex nihilo. That's actually
really
a huge
hilarious to have Tom Tom and Kent Hovind and William Lane Craig in the same discussion say, figure out what's true, and we can watch Bring Popcorn.
I know exactly what would happen in there.
There is no universe. That's what you're misled. You misunderstood
or mislaid. Either way.
Creation. There is no universe. There are no galaxies.
So
there are no black holes. There are no dark matter. There are no.
Oh, there is a black hole.
There's a black hole somewhere.
For the last 2 hours, or 1 hour.
I will say this: there's going to be
the Earth is an enclosed system.
Okay, I will say this: we are starting to pin up to the 2.5 hour mark. And as much as I am very much enjoying this conversation, it is starting to get incredibly long. So for the sake of curating things, I'm going to do two things. We're going to have the last 10 minutes of the stream with both on at the same time. And then I'm going to have a 5-minute wrap-up after that, where it's mostly going to be me.
And I will say this. I thank Tom for the guts to come in here.
I do too. We
wanted to make sure that this was not an unpleasant experience for you. And definitely thank you for being in the chat.
Oh, I'm thankful you were in the chat. I'm thankful that you've been in here, because even though we disagree, it's still been a roughly enjoyable conversation. So I do thank you for coming in. But I want to give just a quick 5 minutes where you can give your best. Every single thing you've got, and I can start a timer for you so you have perfect time. And RJ, if you can give him the respect to not respond until afterwards. Quick 5 minutes. everything you've got, every view that you have about the flat Earth, theism, evolution, everything that makes you and your particular epistemology yours. And I can start you off right now.
The Earth is a created realm. It's an enclosed system. The sky is the limit, and the ground is flat with hills, mountains, and valleys. The water, the oceans are level. The heliocentric model is a fallacy, does not work, does not make any sense, unless you bring pseudoscience into it, such as gravity and all that bullshit. That's all I have to say.
So you're only going to use 33 seconds.
That's all I need.
Okay, perfectly fine. Then that puts the next. I'll start your timer, RJ. I'm going to give you just the 5 minutes that I planned on giving.
Yeah, I may not need it either. In a nutshell, I think that TomTom has been illustrating all of the pitfalls of people who suffer from an inability to tell primary from secondary sources, who don't do methods procedure. That when probed on where he's getting his information from, he doesn't know where he got his information from. He boldly denies the existence of anything that doesn't fit his paradigm. He's a presuppositional top-down dogmatist. And given that it is 21st century, when the information is so horrifically available, there is such an astonishing lack of curiosity reflected by the fellow, who dismisses such a huge body of work that is one of the pinnacles of human creativity, that includes Islamic science as part of that great trail. And it is a tragedy and a travesty that in the 21st century we have people who can think as TomTom does. So I don't need 5 minutes either.
Okay, that's perfectly fine. Hey, you only used 53 seconds. That makes this a whole lot easier. So with that, that is the final statements from both on the particular conversation, just because we are starting this wrap up for time. I have work in the morning, unfortunately, and I've got other stuff that still has to be done tonight. I did enjoy having the stream with you guys. TomTom, I'm very happy that you came on. Whether or not there were disagreements, I'm glad that you were here to voice your opinion. So thank you very much for coming on, sir.
Thank you, guys. Take care.
See ya. All right, and that leaves me and you, RJ.
Whee! Wasn't that fun?
It was fun. All right, so for the last 5 minutes, I'm going to go over what we've got planned for the channel for the next little bit of time. Obviously, we have to wait a little bit. I'm not 100% certain of how long it takes for YouTube Super Chats to send their money. I know they take their 30% and then they process it through AdSense. But we did earn enough to get RJ all of the equipment that we planned on getting him.
I am so grateful for you, gang. This is given how squeaky things have been at various times. Thank you.
So this is your boom arm, this is your pop filters, this is your Yeti microphone, this is a higher fidelity camera. This is everything you need to get your setup up to par, where you can run your show better. And anybody who has not seen RJ Downard's channel, we're going to work on restructuring it a little bit so it's a little more aesthetically pleasing.
Yeah, I just love to be able to do things, and maybe, of course, we'll still have to tinker with how my stupid platform works, because I'd like to be able to have the right software. And do I have enough memory to handle all of that, all of this stuff, to make sure that it runs smoothly? Because I'd like to put graphics. I'd like to have the opening logo that Peter came up with running more efficiently, and all of that. So lots to
actually,
do.
Both me and Godless Iowan can help you with that, because we both run streams every now and again. And Iowan actually knows how to run. He's better at it than I am. He knows how to run streams that actually have the openings beforehand. Both Iowan and Kyle Curtis can help with that.
Yeah, well, we'll have to do a live Google chat where we can go over it, so I can get everything reconfigured in that once everything is running amok.
Yep, once we have all the equipment in, then we'll do that. And ideally, YouTube should only take about maybe 5 days to process this, but I'll talk with Steve and other people who've had more experience with Super Chat, so I'll know when that's available, so we can start shipping things out. Ideally, should only take about a week to get that stuff to you. And then whatever's... I think
once all that is set up, then in principle, I can start recording the book.
Oh yeah, definitely. I think at this point we might also want to get you like a tiny bit of soundproofing too, if we've got a little bit extra, anything for the audio fidelity at that point. But this takes care of all of that. thank you guys for coming out here. Again, thank TomTom one more time for coming out. I really enjoyed having him on and having the conversations. We could not have had...
guts. It takes guts to walk into the lion's den.
Like, trust me, as much as we disagree, TomTom, it was a week of me trying very hard to get somebody to come on and give their opinions on the channel, and we couldn't get to it. And I was very glad, especially since we were able to have the little divide. There was the fundraising half of the stream where we got ourselves to our goal, and then there was the conversation half of the stream. I'm very happy we were able
the cherry on the sundae.
Yeah, I'm glad that we were able to have it. I'm glad. Sorry, there were a few technical issues. I'm unaware of some of the things that Streamlabs does to ruin my day, like playing audio that's supposed to be only here out there and stopping audio when I revert it through a different area. But with that said, there will definitely be some sort of after show. If you want to be part of that, please contact me on Twitter or through my Discord, and I'll see what we can do. But thank you guys very much. I enjoyed every minute of having you guys here, and I enjoyed every minute of the discussion, even the parts that I was mainly just moderating. So thank you all.